The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not the sharp sting of something broken, not the metallic hint of blood you get when a knee is scraped. Nothing like that. This was a smell that belonged in a warm room, the kind of smell that tells your body to relax before your mind has decided it's safe. Orange peel, cinnamon, a little smoke from the fireplace, and underneath it, faint but unmistakable, the bitter chemical edge of something that did not belong in a cup meant for comfort. I stood in the doorway of my tea room with the bell above the door still trembling from the last customer's exit, and I watched the steam rise from a teapot that had been poured for someone who would never lift the cup. Outside, snow was beginning to settle on the harbor road, softening the world into silence. Inside, my hands wouldn't stop shaking, because I understood in a way that was too sudden to deny. Someone had brought a death into my quiet place on purpose. If you're listening late at night, and you like your mysteries gentle and clue-driven, stay with me. This is a fictional cozy mystery audiobook. There is no gore. The danger is real, but the telling stays calm. And when you're ready, breathe with me, and let the story open like a folded letter by firelight. The Christmas tea room had been my second chance. When I first rented the little corner shop on Lantern Quay, people told me it was too small, too tucked away, too easy to miss. They said a tea room needed foot traffic and signage, and a street that tourists wandered without thinking. They weren't wrong about any of that. But Harbolite wasn't the kind of town where you built something by shouting. You built it by being steady, by being kind, by remembering what people took in their tea, and which widow preferred the table near the window, and which retired sailor liked his scones warm enough to sting his fingertips. My name is Odelia Hart, and I learned steadiness the hard way. I was 41 when I arrived in Harbolite with a suitcase that smelled like the attic where it had been stored for years and a quiet ache in my chest that made it hard to breathe on certain dates. I told myself I came for the sea air. I told myself I came to restart. I told myself a lot of gentle lies, the kind that help you survive. The truth was simpler. I came because I needed a place where no one knew the worst thing that had happened to me. Harbolite, in winter, was perfect for that. The town became smaller when the tourists left. People moved slower. They spoke softer. They made room for each other in grocery aisles and at bus stops. They understood without asking that grief was not something you got over. It was something you learned to carry without dropping it in public. The tea room opened in November. By the first week of December, I had regulars. By the second week, I had regulars who brought friends. By the third week, I had the beginning of something that felt like community, fragile and bright. And on the night before Christmas Eve, that community was about to be tested. The day had been busy, the kind of busy that makes your feet ache but your heart feel full. The harbor lights came on early, reflected in dark water like scattered coins. A choir of schoolchildren sang carols near the market square, bundled in scarves that swallowed their chins. A man dressed as Father Christmas handed out candy canes and pretended not to mind when toddlers burst into tears at the sight of him. In the tea room, the fireplace had been going since mid-morning. I kept it low, more glow than blaze, because the room was small, and the smell of smoke could overwhelm the delicate teas. Still, the flame made the place feel like a pocket of safety. Safety is a seductive thing. It convinces you that nothing bad can happen as long as you keep the lights warm and the music soft. I should have known better. It started with a reservation that wasn't on my book. At 4:30, while I was wiping the counter and listening to the kettle settle, the bell above the door chimed, and a man stepped inside carrying a gust of cold air on his coat. He looked like he had walked straight out of a winter postcard. Tall, dark wool overcoat, a scarf wrapped neatly, no frayed ends. His hair was damp with snow that had not yet melted. He had the kind of face that people trusted at first glance, not because it was particularly handsome, but because it looked composed. Reliable. The sort of face you expected to see attached to a calm voice on a late-night radio program. He paused just inside the doorway and took in the room as if measuring it against an expectation. Then he smiled. Good afternoon. I'm here for the 6 o'clock booking. I checked my little reservation notebook, even though I already knew what I would find. There was no 6 o'clock booking. I'm sorry, I said. I don't have you down. What name? He gave it without hesitation. Mr. Lark. Something about it tightened the skin at the back of my neck. Not the name itself. The ease of it. Like he had practiced being believable. I kept my voice polite. And how many in your party, Mr. Lark? Just myself. I asked for the table by the fireplace. My gaze flicked, without meaning to the small table nearest the hearth. I called it the Ember Table. It was where people sat when they wanted to feel looked after without being fussed over. I was careful who I gave it to, not because it was special furniture, but because it felt like a promise. He watched my eyes move. His smile didn't change, but something in his attention sharpened. You can't, I said carefully, reserve a specific table here. It's first come, first served. He nodded as if he expected resistance. I understand. I'd still like to have tea. If you have space. I did have space. The afterwork rush had eased, and my next wave wouldn't arrive until carol rehearsal ended at the church. Of course, I said. Please sit where you like. He chose the Ember Table anyway. He removed his gloves slowly, placed them on the chair beside him, and sat with his back straight, his hands folded as if waiting for a meeting rather than a pot of tea. He did not look at the menu. I'll have your Christmas blend, he said. I paused. The Christmas blend was not printed on the menu. It was written on a chalkboard behind the counter in a corner where only regulars tended to look. It was not a secret, but it wasn't something a stranger usually asked for without scanning the room first. You've been here before? I asked. He looked at me and offered that calm, practiced smile again. Not in person. I should have asked what he meant. I should have pressed. I should have listened to the small warning my body was trying to give me. Instead, I did what women are trained to do when something feels odd. I smoothed it over. All right, I said. Christmas blend. Any food? A mince pie, he replied, as if it were the only sensible choice. And whatever you recommend that's warm. Ginger scones, I said automatically, with clotted cream. Perfect. I turned toward the counter, the unease settling behind my ribs like a stone. I told myself it was nothing. A customer. A man who liked to feel important. People came into a tea room carrying all sorts of needs. Some wanted warmth. Some wanted attention. Some wanted to be seen. Some wanted to disappear. I made his tea. I warmed the pie. And as I moved around the room, I became aware of him in the way you become aware of an extra clock tick in a quiet house. Not loud. Not rude. Just present. At 5:15, he opened a newspaper he hadn't brought in with him. I noticed because I hadn't seen him carry it. The paper was folded neatly, placed beside his cup like it belonged there. It looked fresh, the edges crisp, as if he had plucked it from thin air. I told myself I must have missed it. At 5:30, he asked for a second pot. I haven't finished, he said, and it was true. His first pot was only half gone. Of course. When I brought the second pot, he looked up. You keep a ledger of reservations? He asked. Yes. May I see it? I stared at him. No. His smile softened, as if he understood my discomfort and wanted to reassure me. Of course. Forgive me. Occupational habit. What occupation? I heard myself ask. He didn't answer directly. One where people tell me stories that don't match the paperwork. My throat tightened. You're not from the council, are you? That made his smile shift slightly, and for the first time, he looked like a man who could be amused. No. I'm nothing so ordinary. He lifted his teacup and sipped. Then he said, very calmly, you have a guest arriving tonight who will not leave alive. The room did not change. The fireplace did not go out. The small speaker by the window did not stop playing soft carols. But my body reacted as if a door had slammed somewhere behind me. I'm sorry. I managed. His gaze held mine. I don't make jokes about that sort of thing. I took one step closer without meaning to, as if proximity could make it more sensible. What are you talking about? He set down the cup. A woman will come here for tea tonight. She will sit where I am sitting. She will have the Christmas blend because she thinks it's sentimental. She will eat something sweet because she believes sweetness is safety. And then she will die. My mouth went dry. You're sick, I said, but my voice was too quiet. Not accusatory enough. He shook his head slowly, almost kindly. No. I'm early. I should have shouted. I should have run to the street and flagged someone down. I should have called the police. Instead, I stood there, frozen by the most dangerous thing in the world. Confusion. Because if he was threatening me, why was he telling me in advance? And if he was warning me, why did he look so calm? What do you want? I asked. He reached into his coat and removed a folded card, the size of a place-setting label, and placed it on the table between us. Read it when she arrives, he said. Not before. Then he stood. He put on his gloves. He left coins on the table, more than enough to pay. And he walked out into the early dark. I didn't follow him. I didn't touch the card. I stood behind the counter for a long minute staring at the ember table as if it had become an open mouth. Then I did what I always did when I was afraid. I made tea. At 5:45 the tea room began to fill again, not with crowds, but with the soft rhythm of Harbolite's evening. An older couple took the window seat and spoke in murmurs. A young mother with a toddler ordered hot chocolate and apologized for the child's sticky hands. Two friends arrived in matching red scarves and laughed about something I didn't hear. Normal life. Warm life. And all I could think was that someone had just promised me death would enter my doorway, like any other customer. At 6:10 she arrived. She was not dramatic. She did not look like a victim in a story. She was a woman in her late 50s, perhaps early 60s, with hair pinned neatly beneath a wool hat and cheeks pink from the cold. She carried a gift bag printed with snowflakes. She looked like the sort of woman who remembered everyone's birthdays and made sure you ate something at gatherings. She paused at the doorway as if drinking in the warmth, then smiled at me. Odelia. I hope it's all right. I'm a bit late. I knew her. Of course I did. Everyone in Harbolite knew Belinda Carr. Belinda ran the charity committee. Belinda arranged the Christmas market. Belinda chaired the church fete and the harbor cleanup and the winter coat drive. Belinda had this sort of kindness that felt like a blanket around a town. My stomach dropped. Belinda, I said, and my voice did not sound like mine. Yes. Of course. Come in. She shook snow from her coat and glanced around. Is the fireplace table free? My feet are frozen. I looked at the ember table. It was free. The man who called himself Mr. Lark had been sitting there, and now he was gone, leaving behind his coins and his card and his warning. I felt as if the room was tilting. Yes, I said. It's free. Belinda moved toward it, smiling as she went, and sat down as if she belonged there. I forced my body to work. What can I get you? I asked. Belinda laughed softly. Your Christmas blend, of course. It's my little tradition. And a mince pie, if you have any left. My hands went cold. Belinda, I said, are you meeting someone? No, she replied, still smiling. Just giving myself a treat before I head home. I've been running around all day. And I have a gift I need to wrap before tomorrow. She gestured at the snowflake bag by her chair. I nodded, pretending my mind wasn't screaming. I'll be right back. Behind the counter, my hands trembled as I reached for a teapot. Do not give her anything, my mind said. Call someone. Stop this. But the other customers were here. The room was full. If I called the police and pointed at Belinda and said she was going to die, they would look at me as if I were the one who needed help. And if the man was lying, if he was a cruel prankster, if he was testing my fear, I would have created a scene that would stain my tea room forever. Then I remembered the card. Read it when she arrives, he had said. Not before. I crossed the room quickly, my heart pounding, and picked it up from the ember table while Belinda looked down into her purse for a tissue. The card was heavier than it should have been. On the front, in neat block writing, were 4 words. Check the sugar bowl first. I swallowed hard. The sugar bowl was a little porcelain dish I kept on each table, refilled from a larger jar behind the counter. I used cube sugar because it looked pretty, and because people liked the ritual of adding it to tea. I looked at Belinda's table. The sugar bowl was there. I moved toward it as casually as I could, lifted it as if tidying, and carried it back behind the counter. My fingers shook as I tipped it. The cubes slid, and beneath them, something small and dark clinked against porcelain. A capsule, no larger than the end of my little finger, black and glossy. I stared. Someone had planted it. I lifted it carefully with a teaspoon and placed it on a napkin. Then I looked at the tea I was about to pour. If this capsule was poison, it wasn't meant for the tea itself. It was meant to be dropped in the cup hidden in sugar, dissolved without being noticed. I felt my throat tighten. The man had not been predicting a random tragedy. He had been warning me about a plan that was already in motion. I made a decision in a heartbeat. I would not serve Belinda anything from that table. I would keep her alive. And then I would figure out who had brought murder into my tea room. I carried the teapot to Belinda's table, but I did not set it down. "I'm so sorry," I said, forcing a small smile. "We had a bit of a draft by this table earlier. Would you mind moving just to the next one? I'll bring everything over." Belinda blinked. "Oh, all right, if you think it's better." I guided her to the table one step away, still close to the fireplace but not the ember table. I moved her gift bag, her purse, her coat. She thanked me, warm and trusting. Then I returned to the ember table. I lifted the sugar bowl again and replaced it with a clean one. I gathered the spoon, the napkins, everything, as if simply resetting. In my pocket, the card burned like a secret. Check the sugar bowl first. Someone knew exactly where the poison would be placed. Someone wanted me to find it. Someone wanted to stop it. Or someone wanted to play with me. I served Belinda tea from a fresh pot and watched her closely as she sipped. Her shoulders relaxed. Her smile softened. Her life continued. For the next 20 minutes, nothing happened. No sudden collapse. No gasp. No drama. The tea room returned to its gentle rhythm, and I began to wonder if the capsule was not poison at all, but something else. A vitamin. A harmless prank meant to frighten me. Then Belinda's hand drifted to her throat. She blinked, confused. She set down her cup. "Odelia," she said softly, and her voice sounded wrong. Not loud, not panicked, just thin. I felt peculiar. My blood turned to ice. I moved toward her. "Belinda, what do you feel?" "Light-headed," she murmured. "As if the room is," she swallowed. Turning. I looked at her tea. I looked at her plate. She had eaten the mince pie. The mince pie. The capsule hadn't mattered. The poison wasn't in the sugar. It was in the food. My mind snapped into a cold clarity. The sugar bowl was the decoy. The trick. The real delivery was something Belinda would choose without thinking, because it was her tradition. I leaned close, keeping my voice calm because panic spreads. "Belinda, listen to me. You're going to stand up slowly, and we are going to walk to the back room where it's quiet." "Can you do that?" Belinda tried to smile. "Oh, don't fuss. I'm probably just tired." "Please," I said, and something in my tone must have reached her, because she nodded. I guided her behind the counter, through the small door to my back room where I kept extra supplies and wrapped pastries in paper. She sat on the little chair by the shelf. Her skin looked pale now, the pink gone from her cheeks. I reached for my phone with hands that would not stop trembling, and I called the emergency number, giving my address, my name, my voice steady by force. While I spoke, Belinda's eyes drifted to the shelf where I kept gift boxes and ribbon. She whispered, "My bag." "I'll bring it," I said. I returned to the front, grabbed her snowflake bag, and came back. In that brief moment, when I stepped away, the tea room continued as normal. Customers still chatted quietly. A spoon still clinked against a saucer. The fireplace still crackled. It was frightening how easily horror could hide beneath the surface of cozy life. Belinda's fingers fumbled in the bag, and she pulled out a wrapped tin. "Mince pies," she whispered. "For the vicar's wife." I promised. My heart dropped. Belinda hadn't just eaten a mince pie. She had brought mince pies. The one she ate might not have been mine at all. I stared at the tin. "Belinda," I said gently, "did you bring these for yourself?" She tried to nod. "I thought I'd have one here. Then take the rest." My mouth went dry. If she brought them, then the poison might have been planted before she arrived. Which meant the killer did not need access to my kitchen. They only needed access to Belinda. The realization made my stomach roll. Belinda tried to focus on my face, her eyes glassy now. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "I'm making a fuss, aren't I?" "No," I said, and my voice softened with something fierce. "No, you're not." I held her hand, and her fingers were cold. And then, as her breathing grew shallow, a thought hit me with the force of a wave. The man who warned me, Mr. Lark. If he knew, why didn't he stop it earlier? Unless he couldn't. Unless the murderer wasn't a stranger. Unless the murderer was someone woven into Harbolite so deeply that warning was safer than confronting. The paramedics arrived quickly, their boots thudding on my floorboards, their voices professional and calm. They took Belinda away on a stretcher with blankets tucked around her and oxygen on her face. As they lifted her through the doorway, she turned her head slightly and looked at me with an expression that made my throat burn. Not accusation. Trust. As if she believed I would handle whatever came next. When the back room door closed and the stretcher disappeared, I stood alone with the smell of cinnamon still hanging in the air. My tea room was full of people who did not know what had just happened, and I had to keep my face steady and my voice calm while a part of me wanted to break. I cleared tables. I washed cups. I smiled. I made polite apologies about closing early due to an emergency. When the last customer left and the bell stopped ringing, the silence hit like a weight. I locked the front door. I turned the sign to closed. And I pulled the tin of mince pies from Belinda's bag, set it on the counter, and stared at it as if it were a live thing. Someone had tried to kill Belinda Carr. In my tea room. On Christmas. I opened the tin. Inside were 6 mince pies, their tops dusted with sugar, the crimped pastry edges neat and careful. They looked perfect. I lifted one with a napkin, not touching it directly, and held it to the light. There was nothing to see. Poison rarely announces itself. But this was my crime scene now, and I would treat it like one. I remembered something my museum mentor once told me, back when I thought my life would be about artifacts and archives, not ambulances. When you don't know what matters, document everything. The truth likes details. I pulled out my phone and began photographing the tin, the pies, the crumbs, the sugar dust. Then I photographed Belinda's cup, her saucer, the table she had sat at, the clean sugar bowl I had replaced, the original sugar bowl with the capsule wrapped safely in a napkin. Then I sat down at the amber table, the table the man had chosen, and I stared at the empty chair opposite me. The warning card lay in my pocket like a heartbeat. I took it out and turned it over. There was writing on the back too in the same neat block letters. If she survives, look at the guest book. My breath caught. The guest book sat on a small stand near the entrance, something I kept more for tourists than locals. People liked leaving notes about the tea, the fire, the feeling of the place. I had always found it sweet. Now it felt like a trap. I stood and walked to the guest book stand. The book was open to today's page. Dozens of names. Little messages. Merry Christmas, lovely tea, best scones. And one line that did not belong. A single name written in careful ink, with no message beside it. Lark. I stared. He had signed it. He had placed himself in my book as if to prove he had been here, as if to dare me to follow the clue. I leaned closer and noticed something else. The paper beneath the name was slightly indented, as if someone had pressed hard when writing above it. A hidden impression. I slid a pencil from the counter drawer, returned to the page, and shaded gently across the paper. Words emerged like a secret rising from water. She was not the first. She will not be the last. Follow the ribbon. My mouth went dry. Follow the ribbon. In my tea room, ribbon meant gift wrapping. It meant the shelf in the back room where I kept holiday supplies. It also meant the Christmas tree in the corner, decorated with ribbons and ornaments. Someone was playing a game with me. Someone was leaving me a trail. And whether it was a helper or a hunter, I knew one thing with cold certainty. If I didn't follow it, someone else would die. I stood in front of the guest book with a pencil still in my hand, staring at the indented words until they felt like they were pressing into my own skin. Follow the ribbon could have meant something poetic. A sentimental trail. A holiday metaphor. But nothing about tonight felt like metaphor. In my tea room, ribbon was practical. It was what you used when you needed to make something look kind. It was how you turned a plain tin into a gift, how you tied up a box so it felt like care rather than cardboard. I walked to the back room and switched on the small lamp above the shelf. The light was warmer than the overhead bulbs out front, the kind of glow that made my supplies look like a domestic life rather than a business. Spools of ribbon lined the shelf in neat rows. Red satin, green grosgrain, cream velvet. A winter plaid I had bought because it made people smile. I reached for the red satin first because Belinda's gift bag had red handles. The spool was half-used. The cut end was tucked under itself, as if someone had been tidy. But the ribbon on Belinda's tin, the ribbon she had brought in, had not been satin. It had been a stiffer ribbon, the kind that holds a bow with sharp edges. I took down the green grosgrain. Wrong again. Then my fingers paused on the cream velvet, and something in my chest tightened because the velvet ribbon was missing. Not just used. Missing. The empty space on the shelf looked too clean, as if the spool had been removed carefully and intentionally. Someone had been back here. Someone who knew where I kept my supplies. My backroom door had a lock, but it was the kind of lock that kept out honest people. Anyone determined could open it with a bent bit of metal and patience. Or someone could simply use a key. I pressed my palm to the shelf to steady myself and told my mind to slow down. What did the clue really say? Follow the ribbon. That could mean find a ribbon that doesn't belong. I went back to the front and returned to Belinda's snowflake gift bag. I tipped it gently over the counter, letting its contents slide out. Tissue paper. A small roll of tape. A gift tag shaped like a star. And a length of cream velvet ribbon. It was not tied to anything. It was loose, cut clean at both ends, about as long as my forearm. It looked like it had been tucked into the bag deliberately. I held it up to the light. Velvet catches light differently from satin. It drinks it. It looks soft even when it's holding something sharp. At one end, the ribbon had a faint smear. Not chocolate. Not pastry. Wax. Red wax. The same deep red used for sealing expensive envelopes, the kind that made a message feel official and final. Someone had sealed something with wax, then wrapped it with my ribbon, and then tucked the ribbon into Belinda's bag. My heart began to thud. This was not random. This was not a drunk mistake or a spiteful accident. This was choreography. I turned the ribbon over and noticed something else. A thread caught in the velvet pile, almost invisible unless you looked closely. A dark thread, stiff. Hair. It wasn't mine. My hair was light, and it fell in loose waves. This hair was darker, coarser, the kind that belonged to someone who wore hats in winter. I didn't have the luxury of wondering. I had to act. My phone buzzed on the counter. I grabbed it so quickly, I nearly knocked over the teapot I had forgotten to empty. A number I didn't know. I answered. Hello. A calm voice. Professional. Ms. Hart. This is the emergency department at Harbolite Community Hospital. Your friend Belinda Carr was brought in from your premises. My throat tightened. Is she alive? She's alive. A pause. She's stable at the moment. We're treating her for suspected poisoning. We need to ask some questions, and the police have been informed. Relief hit me so hard my knees softened. She's going to be all right. We can't promise that yet, but she's strong, and we're moving quickly. I swallowed. I'm coming. The nurse's voice turned gentler. Please bring anything she ate or drank if you can, and anything unusual you noticed. I have the tin, I said, and her cup and the sugar bowl, and something else. Bring what you can safely. And Ms. Hart. Yes. Try not to touch anything further. Let the police handle evidence. I looked at the ribbon in my hand, at the wax smear, at the hair caught in the velvet. Evidence. Too late. I understand, I said. When I hung up, my hands were steady for the first time all evening. Not because I wasn't afraid. Because Belinda was alive, and I had a chance to keep her that way. I moved with purpose. I wrapped the tin in a clean tea towel and placed it in a paper bag. I placed Belinda's cup and saucer in a second bag, padded with towels, so they wouldn't clink. I took the sugar bowl with the capsule in a sealed sandwich bag. Then I tucked the velvet ribbon into a small envelope, because instinct told me it mattered more than any teacup. As I moved to lock up, I looked at the guest book again.
Lark.
Whoever he was, he had inserted himself like a bookmark into my life. And now I needed to find him. Before I left, I did one more thing. I pulled the CCTV tablet from beneath the counter. It wasn't a sophisticated system. Just a small camera above the till, and another pointed at the seating area. More to discourage petty theft than anything else. I rewound the footage to the moment Mr. Lark entered. There he was, stepping into the tea room with snow on his shoulders. He did not carry a newspaper. Yet at 5:15 he had one. I fast-forwarded, eyes narrowing. At 5:12, a woman walked in. She was bundled in a long coat and a knitted hat pulled low. She ordered a takeaway tea. I remember her now, only because she had apologized 3 times for being in the way. She stood near the ember table while I prepared her order. And as she waited, her gloved hand slid something onto the table. A folded newspaper. She did it so smoothly, it looked like she was simply resting her hand. Then she picked up her tea and left. 3 minutes later, Mr. Lark opened the newspaper as if it had always been his. My throat tightened. They were working together. Or she was delivering something to him. I rewound again and watched the woman's face. The hat covered most of it, but the profile was visible. Older. Not Belinda's age. Younger. And then she turned slightly, and for a brief second, the camera caught her eyes. I froze. I knew her. Not by name, not personally, but by presence. She came into my tea room twice a week and always sat alone and always ordered lemon water with no sugar, no cake, no comfort. She looked like someone who had learned to keep her hunger invisible. I had always assumed she was lonely. Now I wondered if she was watching. I took a screenshot and sent it to Brona, my neighbor, the only person in Harbolite who could move faster than gossip. Brona ran the corner shop across from the quay. She knew everyone's faces and half their secrets. I texted, "Who is this? Urgent.
Call me."
Then I locked the tea room and hurried through the snow toward the hospital, the paper bags cutting into my fingers, the ribbon envelope tucked into my coat like a heart. At the hospital entrance, the warmth hit me, sterile and sharp with disinfectant. Belinda was in a treatment bay. She looked smaller than she did in the tea room, her cheeks pale, her lips dry. But her eyes opened when she heard my voice. "Odelia," she whispered. I took her hand carefully. "I'm here. You're safe." Belinda tried to smile and failed. "I'm sorry. I ruined your night." "You didn't ruin anything. Someone tried to hurt you." Her eyes flickered, with something like fear. "I know." The nurse turned toward me. "Police are here. They'll want to speak with you." A man stepped into the bay with a notebook in one hand and a look in his eyes that told me he had been awake too long. He wasn't young, but he wasn't old either. Early 40s. A face shaped by wind and work, the kind of face you see in coastal towns. "Miss Hart," he said quietly. "Detective Sergeant Halden Price." His voice was calm, but his gaze was sharp. "I run the Christmas tea room," I said, because it was easier than saying I was terrified. "I know. I was there once. Last winter. Your ginger scones."
He paused.
"I'm sorry this happened in your place." I didn't know what to do with kindness from a man carrying a badge, so I nodded. He looked at the bags I carried. "You brought items." I did. Tin of pies. Cup and saucer. Sugar bowl. Capsule. His eyebrows lifted slightly. Capsule. I told him everything. Mr. Lark. The warning. The card. The sugar bowl. Belinda's symptoms. The tin. I did not soften it. I did not dress it up. And when I described the hidden message in the guest book, something in his face tightened. "You're sure you saw the name written as Lark?" "Yes." And then you found indented writing. Yes. He stared at me for a long moment, then said, "That's a tactic. Pressure writing. Old trick. Usually used when someone wants a message to be found only by the person who knows to look." Meaning he wanted me to find it. Or someone wanted you to find it. I swallowed. Are you saying the man could be helping? I'm saying I don't know yet. He looked down at Belinda. Miss Carr, can you tell me who gave you the mince pies you brought in? Belinda's eyes drifted to the ceiling as if searching memory through fog. No one gave them. I made them. My stomach dropped. You made them, I repeated. Belinda nodded weakly. This morning. In my kitchen. For the vicar's wife. I wrapped them in the tin and put them by the door, and I was going to drop them off after tea. D.S. Price leaned forward slightly. Did anyone have access to your kitchen today? Belinda's brow furrowed. Only me. A pause. And my niece, but she was only there 10 minutes to pick up a scarf. What's your niece's name? Belinda swallowed. Maris. Maris Carr. The detective's pen moved. My mind raced. If Belinda baked them, the poison was planted in her home, not my tea room. Which meant the killer's target was Belinda, not my business. But why bring it into my tea room, then? Why stage it here? Unless the tea room was part of the story. Unless someone wanted the murder to happen where people would talk. Where it would ripple through the whole town like a stone thrown into still water. D.S. Price straightened. Miss Hart, I need you to answer one more question. Yes. Do you know of anyone who would want to harm Belinda Carr? I stared at him because my first instinct was to say no. Belinda was everyone's auntie. Everyone's organizer. Everyone's comfort. But then I remembered how power works in small towns. Belinda knew everything. Not maliciously. Just by living in the middle of people's lives. And people who know everything can become dangerous. She chaired the harbor committee, I said slowly. She decided which stalls went where at the Christmas market. She handled funds. Donations. D.S. Price nodded. Money and influence. And she was persistent, I added carefully. If she thought something was wrong, she wouldn't let it go. The detective's gaze sharpened. Persistent about what? I thought of the warning card, the guest book, the ribbon, the wax. And I thought of my own experience with quiet threats. People don't poison someone for nothing. She might have found out something, I said. Something someone didn't want her to know. Belinda's fingers tightened around mine, weak but deliberate. Odelia, she whispered. I did. I leaned closer. What did you find? Belinda swallowed, her voice thin. The donation box. At the church bazaar. It wasn't right. D.S. Price's pen stopped. What wasn't right? He asked gently. Belinda's eyes fluttered. Money missing. Not much. But I counted twice. Who had access? He asked. Belinda's gaze drifted toward the curtain as if the answer was hiding there. The vicar's wife. She said she would lock it away. D.S. Price's face went very still. Then he said, All right, rest now. We'll speak again when you're stronger. He turned to me. Miss Hart, I need you to come to the station in the morning for a formal statement. I will. And I need you to lock your tea room and not return alone tonight. I blinked. Why? He held my gaze. Because whoever did this planned it. That means they can plan again. And because you are now involved. Involved how? Because someone warned you. And because someone left you clues. His voice lowered. And because I don't like puzzles that involve poison. When I left the hospital, the snow had thickened, turning streetlights into halos. My phone buzzed. Brona. I answered immediately. Tell me. Her voice came fast, the way it does when someone is trying not to be overheard. That woman you sent. That's Nessa Pike. Works at the florist's. Quiet one. Keeps to herself. Odelia. Why are you asking? Because she brought a newspaper to my tea room and left it for a man who warned me someone would die. Silence, then a soft, shocked sound. Odelia. Nessa Pike's brother died last year. Brona's voice dropped. They said it was an accident at the old cannery. But folks whispered. They said he was going to talk about something he saw, Then he fell. And the Pike girl hasn't been right since. My throat tightened. A pattern. A person about to talk. Then an accident. Belinda finds missing money. Belinda gets poisoned. And someone is leaving me clues. I went very still. Brona. Is there any reason someone would connect Belinda's death to my tea room? Brona hesitated. People talk, you know that. If something happens in your place, everyone will talk about it. It'll be the story of Christmas. That was exactly it. This wasn't just murder. It was narrative. Someone was staging a story for Harbolite to swallow. And someone else was trying to break the story before it finished. I walked home the long way, because I didn't want to pass the tea room again. The windows would be dark, and I would imagine shadows moving behind them. At my cottage door, I paused. Something small and pale lay on my doormat. An envelope. Cream-colored. Sealed with red wax. My breath caught. I knelt, lifted it carefully, and turned it over. No address. No name. Only a single symbol pressed into the wax. A teacup. My hands went cold. Someone had left this at my home.
Meaning they knew where I lived.
Meaning the game was no longer contained inside my tea room. I carried the envelope inside, locked the door, and stood with it beneath the lamp on my small kitchen table. I did not open it immediately. I listened first. The house was quiet. The kettle ticked as it cooled. The wind pressed against the window. And beneath it all, the faintest sound, like a slow exhale. Not from the kettle. From the letter. No, I told myself. That's fear. That's imagination. But my fingers still trembled as I broke the seal. Inside was a single folded page. The writing was neat, the same block letters as the warning card. You saved her tonight. Well done. But you didn't save the truth. If you want to stop this, you must understand why Belinda was chosen. Go to the church tea room committee ledger. Look for the ribbon marks. And then, in smaller writing beneath it, as if an afterthought, do not trust the one who offers comfort first. I stared at the page until my eyes burned. Ribbon marks. My stomach turned. Because earlier, I had found wax on a velvet ribbon in Belinda's bag. Someone was telling me that ribbon was the key. And someone was warning me that comfort was a disguise. In my mind, comfort had a face. Belinda's. But Belinda was the victim. So, whose comfort? The vicar's wife, perhaps, with her gentle smile and warm hands that folded donations away. Or someone else entirely. Someone who would appear at my tea room with sympathy and concern, offering help, offering tea, offering warmth. The person most likely to be invited close. I sat at my kitchen table with the threatening letter in my hands and realized something else. This wasn't only about catching a killer. It was about learning to see through softness. And that was a lesson I had failed before in my life. Not again. The next morning, the snow had stopped but the cold had stayed. It sat on Harbolite like a quiet warning, glazing the rooftops, whitening the hedges, making every sound feel muffled and watchful. The town looked innocent in the pale morning light. It always did. That was the trick of small places. They could look clean even when something rotten was tucked away in the folds. I didn't sleep. I lay in bed listening to my own breath and the occasional groan of the wind against the window, replaying Belinda's fingers tightening around mine, her whisper about missing money, the warning in my kitchen envelope, and the last line that kept looping through my head like a hymn I couldn't escape. Do not trust the one who offers comfort first. At 8:30, I was already walking towards St. Bridget's Church with my coat buttoned to my throat and the velvet ribbon tucked in a sealed bag in my pocket. The sea wind cut through the street like a blade, and the harbor smelled of salt and diesel and distant storms. The church sat on a small rise above the market square, stone walls dark with damp, stained glass windows like frozen jewels. It looked peaceful. Churches always did. They held grief and joy with the same steady hands. I pushed through the heavy wooden doors and let the smell of old stone and candle wax meet me. A woman was already there, arranging poinsettias near the altar. Verity Quill, the vicar's wife. She turned at the sound of the door and smiled as if she had been waiting for someone to arrive and rescue her from her own thoughts. Odelia, love. Her voice was warm, the kind that made people want to confess things. I heard about Belinda. How awful. How simply awful. There it was. Comfort offered first. My stomach tightened. Verity crossed the aisle quickly and took my hands in hers before I could step away. Her fingers were cool and dry, her grip firm in that way some women use to communicate sincerity. "I'm so glad you're all right," she said. "I was worried you'd be in shock. That sort of thing happening in your tea room. On Christmas week. It's dreadful." I forced my voice to stay polite. "Thank you. Belinda is stable." Verity's eyes widened, and for a moment the warmth cracked into something else. Relief. Sharp and almost private.
Oh.
She pressed a hand to her chest. "Thank God. Thank God." I watched her carefully. Was that relief for Belinda? Or relief for something else? I eased my hands away gently. "I need to see the tea room committee ledger." Verity blinked. "The ledger?" "Belinda mentioned missing money from the donation box," I said. "I want to check the records." Verity's smile returned, a little too smooth. "Of course. Of course. Belinda was always so diligent. She worried about every penny. It's admirable, really." She hesitated. "But perhaps you should let the police handle that." "They will," I said. "But I want to understand what Belinda was worried about. For her sake." Verity's gaze held mine for a beat too long. Then she nodded.
All right. Come with me.
She led me through a side door into a smaller room that smelled of paper and furniture polish. The parish office was cozy, cluttered, ordinary. A space where people signed forms and whispered about hymns and argued politely over raffle prizes. Verity opened a metal filing cabinet and pulled out a thick hardbound book, its cover worn from years of handling. The tea room committee ledger. She placed it on the desk with a soft thud, as if it were heavier than paper should be. I sat opposite her and opened the ledger carefully. The entries were neat. Dates, amounts, notes. Some names of donors. A column for cash and a column for checks. Everything looked normal at first glance. Then I remembered the message. Look for the ribbon marks. I scanned the edges of the pages. Nothing. I scanned the margins. Nothing. Then I noticed the spine. Along the inner fold where the pages met the binding, there were faint impressions. Tiny indentations, as if something narrow had been pressed between certain pages. Ribbon. I slid my finger along the fold and felt the slight ridge where the paper had been compressed. Verity watched me with a polite expression that didn't reach her eyes. "What exactly are you looking for?" she asked. I didn't answer. I began turning pages, slower now, watching for the pattern. 3 pages in, I found it. A faint smear of red wax in the crease near the binding, like a fingerprint that had been wiped too quickly. Then another page, with the same smear. Then another. Always near the same type of entries. Large cash donations. Not huge. Just large enough to matter in a small town. 200. 300. 500. And always recorded on dates when Belinda would have been present at fundraisers. I swallowed hard. Someone had been sealing envelopes near this ledger, or using sealed envelopes as markers. I turned to the fundraiser entry for the church bazaar, the one Belinda had mentioned. The numbers were tidy. Too tidy. The cash total was rounded, suspiciously clean, like someone had adjusted it to make it look normal. I leaned in closer and caught a faint difference in ink. One line darker than the others. One line written by a different hand. The cash total. Verity's hand. I didn't know it for sure, but my body knew. I had spent years watching people write receipts and notes in my tea room. You learn handwriting the way you learn voices. My pulse thudded. Verity said softly, "Belinda always worried. But sometimes people miscount." I looked up slowly. "Sometimes they do." Verity held my gaze. "You look tired, Odelia. You've been through a fright. Would you like some tea?" There it was again. Comfort first. I kept my voice calm. "No, thank you." Verity's smile tightened slightly. "All right." I turned another page, and the paper caught the light at an angle. And then I saw it. A small pressed mark along the top edge of the page, as if a ribbon had been used as a bookmark and left its dye behind. Cream velvet. Exactly the color of the missing spool from my shelf. I stared at the stain. My tea room ribbon. In the church ledger. My mouth went dry. This wasn't only about Belinda. This was about access. Someone had been in my back room, taken my ribbon, used it for something involving the church donations, and then put it into Belinda's gift bag as a breadcrumb for me to follow. I looked at Verity again. Her face was pleasant, patient,
Warm.
a woman offering comfort. A woman standing between me and the truth, like a soft curtain. I closed the ledger gently. I need to photograph a few pages for the police, I said. Verity's eyes flicked quick. I'd rather you didn't. That's parish business. It's evidence, I replied. Belinda was poisoned. Verity's voice softened, coaxing. Of course. But we mustn't jump to conclusions. Let's not cause a scandal. A scandal. That word had teeth. In small towns, scandal was treated like a disease. Not because it was worse than harm, but because it was visible. People feared what would make them look bad more than what would make them unsafe. I stood, ledger in hand. I'm going to take photographs, I said quietly. With or without your blessing. Verity's smile thinned. Odelia. I leaned closer, lowering my voice. Where were you yesterday between 4 and 6? Her eyes widened a fraction. Excuse me. Belinda was poisoned, I repeated. Someone placed a decoy capsule in my sugar bowl and the real poison in a mince pie. Someone left me a card. Someone left me an envelope at my home sealed with wax. Someone wants me to follow clues. I held Verity's gaze. And someone used my tea room ribbon to mark church ledger pages. Verity's face went very still. Then she laughed softly, as if I were being silly. Oh, love. You're spiraling. It's understandable. But you're accusing the wrong person. Am I? I asked. Verity moved around the desk, coming closer, lowering her voice into something intimate. I was here, she said, preparing the nativity display. All afternoon.
People saw me.
My mind raced. People saw her. That didn't mean she wasn't involved. It meant she had an alibi that was designed to be witnessed. She touched my elbow lightly, a gesture that might have looked caring to anyone else. Go home, she said gently. Rest. The police will handle it. I pulled my arm away. I'm going to the florist, I said. Verity's expression flickered. Why? Because someone who works there delivered a newspaper to a man who warned me Belinda would die. For the first time, Verity's warmth broke completely. Just for a heartbeat. Enough for me to see the fear behind it. Then she rebuilt her face into kindness again. Too late. Be careful, she said softly. Harbolite is full of stories. Not all of them are true. I left the church with the cold air slapping my cheeks and the ledger photographs saved on my phone. Outside, the snow had turned to a thin, icy drizzle that made everything glitter and slide. The market square looked harmless. People carried shopping bags. A dog tugged at a leash. A bus hissed at the curb. And somewhere in this gentle town, someone was arranging death like holiday decor. The florist shop was a narrow little place beside the bakery, its windows fogged from warmth and plant breath. Inside, the air was heavy with greenery and damp earth. Nessa Pike stood behind the counter trimming holly, her hands quick and precise. When she looked up and saw me, her scissors paused. Odelia. Her voice was flat. Not rude. Guarded. Nessa, I said. I need to talk to you. Her gaze flicked toward the back room, then back to me. I'm working. This is about Belinda Carr. Something shifted in her face. Not guilt. Anger. What about her? She was poisoned in my tea room last night, I said. And yesterday, you came in and left a newspaper on the ember table. Nessa's fingers tightened around the scissors. I bought a takeaway tea. You left a newspaper. Nessa's jaw worked. So, who is it for? Nessa's eyes went cold. I don't know what you think you saw. I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshot from my CCTV. The angle caught her profile, her gloved hand sliding the paper onto the table. Her shoulders went rigid. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she whispered, "Not here." She jerked her chin toward the back, and I followed her into a cramped room filled with buckets and ribbon spools and brown paper. Ribbon. My stomach tightened again. Nessa shut the door and leaned against it like she was holding something back. "You don't understand," she said. "Then explain." Her eyes flashed. Belinda stuck her nose where it didn't belong. I went still. Belinda found missing money. Nessa's laugh was sharp. Belinda found more than missing money. She found names. Names of who? Nessa's breath came fast, and for the first time, she looked frightened.
People who take.
People who smile and take. People who treat this town like it belongs to them. I thought of Verity's hand on my elbow. Soft as velvet.
Firm as a chain.
"Nessa," I said gently, "did you poison Belinda?" Her eyes snapped to mine, outraged.
No.
I believed her. Not because she was innocent. Because her anger was too raw to be calculated. "Then why the newspaper?" I asked. Nessa swallowed. "Because he told me to." "He," I repeated. "Mr. Lark." Nessa's face tightened. "That's not his name." "What is it?" She shook her head. "I don't know. He came to me 2 weeks ago. Said he knew about my brother." My chest tightened. Brona was right. Nessa's brother had died at the cannery. "What about your brother?" I asked. Nessa's eyes shimmered, but she didn't cry. She looked like someone who had cried all their tears in private. "They said it was an accident," she whispered. "But he told me it wasn't. He said my brother was killed because he saw something. He said if I wanted the truth, I had to help him." "Help him how?" "Small things," she said, voice shaking. "Messages. Notes. Deliveries. He said he couldn't be seen. That people were watching." My throat tightened. "And you believed him?" "I didn't want to," Nessa whispered. "But he told me something no stranger could know." She pressed her fingers to her mouth. "He told me what my brother said to me the day before he died. A sentence no one else heard. And he wrote it down exactly." I thought of pressure writing. Hidden messages. Indentations. A man who lived in ink and shadows. "Nessa," I said carefully, "what did he promise you?" "Justice," she replied. "He promised to expose the people who did it. And now Belinda is poisoned." Nessa flinched. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." I believed that too. Because if Nessa had wanted Belinda dead, she wouldn't look like she was about to collapse from guilt. "What did you deliver yesterday?" I asked softly. Nessa stared at the floor. "A newspaper. And a ribbon." My blood went cold. "My ribbon," I said. Nessa nodded once. "He told me to take it from your tea room. He said you'd notice. He said you'd follow." I felt the room tilt. He had used Nessa. And he had used me. He was orchestrating. But to what end? "Where did you meet him?" I asked. Nessa hesitated. Then she said, "The old cannery." My stomach turned. The place where her brother died. The place where accidents happened. The place where the town pretended not to look too closely. I looked at her, and my voice came out low.
"Nessa.
If you take me there, you could be in danger." Her mouth tightened. "I've been in danger since my brother died. I'm just the only one who knows it." I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the cream envelope with the teacup seal. Nessa's eyes widened. "He uses wax," she whispered. "Always. He seals everything. He says it's proof." "Proof of what?" "That the message hasn't been tampered with," she said. "That no one can say you forged it. He's obsessed with proof."
Proof.
Ledger marks. Ribbons. Wax. A man building a case in the language of evidence, not the language of violence. That meant two things could be true at once. He might be trying to help. And he might also be using death to force the town to pay attention. Nessa's hands shook.
Odelia.
"Belinda, is she going to live?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "But we're going to find out who did this." Nessa nodded, swallowing hard. "Then we go to the cannery." As we stepped back into the florist shop, I saw something on the counter that made my heart stutter. A spool of cream velvet ribbon.
New. Full.
Not mine, but the same color. And beside it a small wax sealing kit, the kind sold as a holiday novelty. A teacup stamp lay among the pieces. My throat closed. I pointed at it, careful to keep my voice calm. Where did that come from? Nessa looked, her face strained. We don't sell that, she whispered. We don't sell wax kits. I felt my blood turn to ice. Someone had placed it there. A gift. A warning. Or an accusation. And suddenly I understood something I hadn't wanted to admit. This wasn't just about Belinda and missing money and a dead brother. This was about my tea room. The teacup seal wasn't a random symbol. It was my symbol. Someone was framing my place as the center of the story. And if I didn't move carefully, Harbolite would begin to believe the most convenient narrative of all. That the death in the Christmas tea room was the tea room's fault. Nessa didn't offer to drive. She didn't offer to make a plan, either, which would have been comforting. Instead, she simply pulled her coat tighter, flipped the shop sign to closed, and walked out into the cold like someone who had been walking into cold places for a long time. I followed. The streets were quieter than they should have been for the day before Christmas Eve. People stayed indoors when the air turned sharp. They saved their warmth. They saved their energy. They told themselves tomorrow would be better. We cut down an alley that smelled faintly of salt and wet stone, then followed the harbor road until the shops thinned and the buildings turned older, more utilitarian. The cannery sat at the edge of town where the water slapped against pilings and the wind had nothing to interrupt it. It had been closed for years, but it still looked busy in the way dead places sometimes do. Like they were pretending. Like they were waiting for the right person to return. Corrugated metal walls, streaked with rust. Broken windows patched with plywood. A wide loading door hanging half off its track. A faded sign above it, the old name rubbed away by weather and time. Nessa stopped at the fence line and looked at the building as if it could see her back. This is where he told me to meet him, she said. Mr. Lark, I murmured. That's not his name, she reminded me, and her voice tightened with anger, as if the lie itself offended her. The fence had a gap where someone had bent the wire back and never fixed it. We slipped through and crossed the yard. Snow lingered in dirty patches. Old pallets sat stacked like bones. A gull watched us from a broken light pole, its head tilted as if judging. The loading door groaned when Nessa pushed it. Inside, the air was colder and smelled like old brine and machine oil. My breath misted. Our footsteps echoed in a hollow space that felt far larger than it looked outside. Nessa raised her chin, trying to look brave. You can come out, she called. Her voice vanished into the cavernous ceiling. No answer. We moved deeper, past long tables that had once held tins and labels, past conveyor belts that had stopped mid-purpose, past hooks suspended from rails like unanswered questions. At the far end, near a wall of boarded windows, a single work light was on. It glowed yellow in the dim, casting a circle of warmth that felt wrong here. Under the light sat a chair. On the chair was a gift box.
Neat. Wrapped.
Tied with cream velvet ribbon. My ribbon. Nessa stopped so suddenly, I nearly bumped into her. That wasn't their last time, she whispered. Last time when? I asked. 2 nights ago. He told me to come here after closing. He said he'd explain about my brother. Her voice cracked. I waited an hour. No one came. I left. I stared at the chair and the box. He wanted us here. He wanted us to walk up to it. He wanted us to touch it. Every instinct in me screamed not to. But every instinct in me also screamed that if I didn't, someone else would be the one to die next. I moved closer, slow, careful, watching the shadows for any sign of movement. The ribbon bow was tied with deliberate precision. The ends were cut on a diagonal, clean. Wax clung to one velvet edge, faint but visible. I did not touch the ribbon. I crouched and looked at the box from the side. There was a slight gap under the lid, as if something had been placed inside without being fully settled. I slid my fingers beneath the box and lifted it. It was heavier than it should have been. Not heavy like a book. Heavy like metal. Nessa took a step closer, her eyes wide. What is it? I don't know, I said. But we don't open it here. Why not? Because whoever left it wants us focused on the box and not on what's behind us. Nessa's breathing turned shallow. I straightened, holding the box to my chest like a shield, and swept my eyes across the room. Nothing moved, but the silence felt too deliberate. I turned slowly, scanning again. And then I saw it. A second chair, deeper in the shadows beyond the work light. I hadn't noticed it because it wasn't lit. On that chair, something pale.
Paper.
An envelope.
Cream.
Red wax. My stomach tightened. Nessa whispered, "He always seals them." We approached the second chair. This envelope had no teacup stamp. The wax was stamped with a bird. A simple silhouette, wings spread. A lark. My skin prickled. This was his signature. His calling card. I picked up the envelope carefully. It was addressed to no one. But the back had a single line written in the same block letters. "If you're here, you're listening."
Good.
Now look up. I froze. Nessa's head jerked upward instantly. I forced myself to do it slowly. Above us, the catwalks ran across the cannery ceiling like the ribs of a skeleton. The rails were rusted. The walkways were narrow. In the far corner, behind a hanging sheet of torn plastic, a dark shape. A person. Watching. My heart slammed. The figure didn't move, didn't wave, didn't speak. Just watched. Nessa whispered, "That's him." The figure shifted slightly, and for a brief second a sliver of face caught the work light. Not enough to identify, but enough to feel the presence of someone who expected to be chased. Then the figure turned and ran along the catwalk. My body reacted before my mind could argue. I ran. Nessa ran beside me, boots thudding on concrete. We found the stairwell that led up, a narrow metal staircase bolted to the wall. It shuddered under our weight. Halfway up, the figure appeared again at the far end of the catwalk, pausing as if making sure we were following. Then he kept moving. We reached the catwalk and chased the sound of footsteps ahead. The metal underfoot rang like a bell with every step. My lungs burned. We rounded a corner and saw him drop down through an open hatch to a lower platform. Nessa shouted, "Stop." He didn't. He disappeared again. We followed, climbing down through the hatch. The lower level was darker, nearer the back of the building where the sea wind found cracks and whistled through them. The smell here was sharper, closer to the brine that had once soaked everything. We turned another corner and stopped. A dead end. A wall of old storage lockers bolted to concrete. No doors open. No obvious exits. Nessa's breath came fast. Where did he go? I stared at the lockers. Then I saw it. One locker door was slightly ajar, the latch not quite closed. I stepped closer. Nessa grabbed my arm. "Don't." I eased her hand away gently. If he wanted to hurt us, he could have done it already. He's leading us. Nessa swallowed. To what? To something that matters. I opened the locker. Inside was a coat. Dark wool. Damp at the shoulders as if it had been worn in snow. And a folder. A thick folder sealed in plastic. And beneath it, taped to the inner wall, a small audio recorder. The kind people used for interviews. My chest tightened. Belinda's case. Evidence. Confessions. That's what this felt like. I lifted the recorder carefully. A note was taped to it. He used the charity as a river. Follow where the river empties. I frowned. A river. Charity money moving like water, diverted quietly. Where would it empty? A personal account. A business. A shell. Nessa whispered. What does it mean? It means Belinda found out where the money was going, I said. And whoever it was decided she had to be silenced. I opened the folder. Inside were photocopies of bank slips, deposit records, and handwritten tallies. Not in Belinda's handwriting. In Verity's. I knew it with the same certainty as before. Neat loops. A certain pressure on downstrokes. A carefulness that looked like virtue, but was really control. The deposits weren't going to the church account. They were going to a private account under a name that sounded like a local business. Harbolite Renewal Trust. My mouth went dry. That wasn't a charity. That was a development committee. A group that had been pushing to renovate the harborfront, to turn old buildings into boutique rentals. Belinda had argued against it at committee meetings, I remembered now. Not loudly, but persistently. She had said they needed transparency. She had said they needed the town to vote. She had said they needed to protect local people from being priced out. People had laughed politely and patted her hand and told her she worried too much. She had been right. Nessa's voice shook. My brother worked at the cannery. Before it closed. I turned to her. What did he do? He did maintenance. He found things. He found shipments. Her eyes darted to the shadows. He said the cannery wasn't dead. Not really. He said people were using it for something. My stomach turned. Money laundering didn't always mean paper. Sometimes it meant goods moving quietly, using abandoned places. I held up the folder. This is enough to put someone in trouble, but it's not enough to prove poisoning. Nessa pointed at the recorder. That is. I turned it over. The battery cover was taped shut, as if someone had made sure it wouldn't fall off in a chase. I pressed play. Nothing. I pressed again. Still nothing.
Dead battery.
My throat tightened with frustration. Nessa looked like she might cry.
No.
It doesn't mean there's nothing recorded, I said quickly. It just means we need power. I slipped it into my pocket, then I heard something that made my blood go cold. Footsteps. Not above us. Not distant.
Close.
Someone was in the cannery with us. Nessa's eyes widened.
He wouldn't come back.
Would he? I shook my head slowly. Not him. This was heavier. Slower. The sound of someone who didn't run. Someone who came to catch. I grabbed Nessa's wrist. We leave.
Now.
We moved fast, but quietly, back along the corridor, toward the hatch and the stairs. But when we reached the stairwell, a figure stepped into view below. Detective Sergeant Halden Price. He looked up at us, his expression tight. Odelia, he called. Step away from the edge. Nessa froze, startled. Relief hit me first, instinctive. The police. Safety. Help. Then the warning in the letter flashed through my mind like lightning. Do not trust the one who offers comfort first. Had Price offered comfort? Yes, in a small way. The ginger scone comment. The soft apology. But Verity had offered comfort first, and yet here was Price in the cannery, alone, without uniforms behind him, in a place no one had told him we were going to. My hand tightened around Nessa's wrist. Why are you here? I asked. His gaze flicked to the folder in my hand. Because you're in a crime scene. And because you didn't listen. I didn't tell you about the cannery, I said. I have ways of finding out where people go. His voice was calm, but there was something clipped beneath it. Come down. Nessa whispered. Is he safe? I didn't answer. Price took a slow step up the stairs. And then, behind him, another figure appeared in the stairwell shadows. A man in a dark coat.
Tall. Calm.
Hands gloved. Mr. Lark. He looked up at me and Nessa, and his mouth curved in a small smile that was not friendly. It was satisfied. Then he turned his head slightly and spoke to Price, too quietly for me to hear. Price's jaw tightened. And in that moment, the world rearranged itself. Mr. Lark and D.S. Price knew each other. Not as strangers. Not as officer and suspect. As collaborators. My chest went tight. Nessa's breath caught. I backed away from the stairs, pulling Nessa with me. Price looked up, his expression changing from authority to something colder. Odelia, he said softly. Don't make this difficult. The line landed like a slap. Because that was what men said when they expected obedience. When they believed you would choose comfort over truth. I felt something steady inside me. Not bravery. Not heroism. Refusal. No, I said. Mr. Lark's smile widened. Price's voice stayed calm. You're trespassing. You have evidence you shouldn't have. Hand it over. Why? I asked, and my voice surprised me with how even it sounded. So, it can disappear. Price's eyes flashed. You don't know what you're talking about. Mr. Lark spoke for the first time, his voice low and smooth. She knows enough. Nessa's body trembled beside me. You said you wanted justice, she whispered to him. You said you wanted the truth. Mr. Lark glanced up at her with a look that made my skin crawl. Not anger. Not regret. Calculation. I wanted a story that would force the town to move, he said. People only wake up when something beloved breaks. You poisoned Belinda, I said. He shrugged slightly.
No.
I arranged that she would be poisoned. That's different.
Nessa let out a small sob.
Price's voice cut in, sharper now. Enough. He stepped up another stair. My mind raced. We were trapped on a lower platform with lockers behind us and a corridor that led deeper into the cannery. But deep places often had exits the surface people didn't know. Nessa had said her brother did maintenance. He would know hidden doors. Nessa's eyes darted left, toward the lockers.
Toward the wall.
Toward something I hadn't seen. She whispered, There's a hatch. I followed her gaze. A square outline in the floor, half hidden under a sheet of torn plastic. A maintenance hatch. I tightened my grip on Nessa's wrist. Go.
We sprinted for it.
Behind us, Price shouted my name. Mr. Lark laughed softly, like he enjoyed the chase. Nessa dropped to her knees, yanked the hatch ring, and hauled it open. A ladder descended into darkness. Cold air rose from it, wet and salty. We climbed down. The hatch slammed above us with a metallic bang, and for a heartbeat we were in complete darkness. Then my phone screen lit as I turned on my torch. The tunnel below the cannery was narrow and damp, lined with brick. Water trickled along a shallow channel at the base. Nessa whispered, This goes to the old outflow. To the sea. My lungs burned. Then we run.
We ran.
The tunnel curved, and our footsteps echoed ahead of us like another set. I clutched the recorder in my pocket, the folder pressed to my ribs, the evidence of corruption, and the shape of a bigger crime. Belinda had been poisoned because she found where the money went. But the money was only the surface. What else moved through this place? What else had Nessa's brother seen? The tunnel opened into a small chamber where pipes ran along the ceiling like veins. A single bulb hung dead from a wire. And on the wall, spray-painted in fresh black letters, a symbol. A teacup. My stomach dropped. He had been here before us. He had marked the path like a hunter marking territory. Nessa's voice shook. He's everywhere. No, I whispered, and my voice came out fierce. He wants us to think he's everywhere. We pushed forward. The tunnel narrowed again, and then the smell changed. The salt grew stronger. The roar of water grew louder. Ahead, a faint rectangle of gray light. The outflow.
The sea.
We burst out onto slick rocks at the base of the harbor wall, where the tide slapped against stone and the wind hit like a shove. Above us, the town sat quiet, unaware that beneath its feet, a chase had been unfolding through tunnels it didn't remember existed. Nessa doubled over, breathing hard. I forced myself to stand straight. We were out, but we weren't safe, because the evidence in my hands could make powerful people desperate. I pulled out my phone and dialed the only number that felt like a lifeline. Brona. She answered on the second ring, voice wary. Odelia. Call the police, I said. Not the station. Call emergency. Tell them DS Holden Price is involved. Tell them to send someone from outside town if they can. And listen carefully. What? She breathed. Belinda was poisoned because she found donation money was being diverted. I have proof. And someone is staging this like a story. Brona's voice went thin. Are you safe? No, I said honestly. But I'm alive. I looked at Nessa, her face pale and determined. We're going to the hospital, I said. Belinda needs to know we're not stopping. Nessa nodded once, tight. And as we climbed the slippery path toward the road, I felt the shape of the mystery settle into place. This wasn't just a single crime.
It was a web.
And the person pulling the threads understood one thing very well. In a town that lives on comfort, fear travels faster than truth. But I had truth in my hands now, and I was done being comforted into silence. The hospital smelled like winter air dragged indoors and scrubbed until it lost its soul. Nessa and I arrived breathless, our coats damp, our hands numb, and I could still feel the cannery tunnel on my skin, the cold brick and the trickle of water, and that painted teacup, like a warning that wanted to follow me everywhere. At the front desk, I gave Belinda's name, and the receptionist's face shifted into that careful neutrality people wear when they are about to deliver news you will never forget. "She's in Rhesus," she said quietly. "You can't go in yet." My mouth went dry. "She was stable." "She was," the receptionist replied. "Then she wasn't." Nessa made a small sound beside me, a sharp inhale that turned into nothing because she was trying not to fall apart in public. I pressed my palm to the counter edge until my fingers stopped shaking. "I have evidence," I said. "I have records. I have a recorder. I need a detective who isn't compromised." The receptionist blinked at the last word, then glanced toward the corridor as if she had heard it too many times in a different context. "I'll tell the nurse," she said, and she did it quickly, as if speed could protect her from consequences. Nessa whispered, "What if she dies?" I didn't answer because I could not afford to let my voice become the place where fear lived. Instead, I thought about Belinda's hand in mine, how she had trusted me with her last lucid words. I did not want her trust to end in silence. A nurse came out 10 minutes later, her eyes tired, her mouth set. "You're Odelia Hart." "Yes." "Belinda Carr is asking for you." She looked at Nessa. "Only one visitor." Nessa's face crumpled for a heartbeat. Then she swallowed hard and nodded. "Go." I followed the nurse down a corridor that felt too bright. My shoes squeaked softly on clean floors. Every door we passed held its own private world of pain. The nurse stopped at a curtain and pulled it back. Belinda lay under a warm blanket with tubes and wires that made her look like someone who had been caught in a net. Her eyes were open but unfocused. Her lips were pale. Her hair was flattened, the neatness gone. When she saw me, her gaze sharpened like a thread tightening. "Odelia," she whispered. I took her hand. It felt colder than it should have. "I'm here," I said. "Stay with me." Belinda's mouth moved, and for a moment no sound came out. Then she managed. "My tin. I have it." Her eyes closed briefly. Relief. Then fear. "I didn't," she whispered. "I didn't poison anything. I made them." "I know." Belinda's grip tightened faintly. "Maris." The name landed in my chest like a stone. "Your niece," I said softly. Belinda tried to nod, and winced, as if the movement hurt. "She was sweet," Belinda whispered. "Too sweet."
She offered to help.
She offered comfort first. Belinda's eyes opened wider, as if she was trying to push a message through a fog. She retied the bow. My throat tightened. "The ribbon." Belinda's lips trembled. "Cream velvet." She said it looked nicer. I felt the world narrow into a single clear line. My ribbon had been on Belinda's tin because Maris had put it there. Not Mr. Lark. Not Nessa. Maris. Belinda's breath hitched. Her voice grew thinner. I counted the cash. I wrote it down. I hid it. "Where?" Belinda's eyes moved toward the side table, where her handbag sat with her coat folded over it. "My hymn book," she whispered. "Inside." "Belinda," I said urgently, "stay with me. You're going to be all right." Belinda's gaze held mine with a strange calm, as if she had already accepted something my mind refused to. "Odelia," she whispered. "Don't let them make it a story about you. Don't let them ruin your place. Your tea room is kindness." Her mouth trembled. "Promise me." My throat burned. "I promise," I said. Belinda exhaled, and the exhale sounded like she was letting go of something heavy. Her fingers loosened in mine. A monitor beeped faster. The nurse stepped in quickly, calling for a doctor. I backed away as they moved around her, hands pressing, voices crisp, urgent but controlled. Belinda's eyes remained open for a moment, unfocused now, as if she was looking through the ceiling to something beyond. Then her eyelids lowered. The long sound of a flat line filled the bay. A doctor spoke softly, words that were practiced, but never gentle. Time of death. I stood there with my hand hovering where Belinda's hand had been, feeling the shape of loss settle in my bones. It was still calm in the room. No screaming. No gore. No drama. Just the quiet finality of a life leaving. A murder that looked like sleep. I stepped into the corridor, my breath shallow, and Nessa was there waiting, her face asking the question she was too afraid to say out loud. I met her eyes and shook my head once. Nessa's hand flew to her mouth. She didn't wail. She didn't collapse. She just made a small sound that was more rage than grief. They killed her, she whispered. Yes, I said. And she told me who. Nessa's eyes sharpened. Who? Maris Carr, Belinda's niece. Belinda said she retied the bow on the tin with cream velvet ribbon. Nessa's jaw clenched hard enough to show muscle in her cheek. That doesn't mean Maris poisoned it, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. It means Maris had the tin, I replied. It means she touched it. It means she chose my ribbon. Nessa's eyes darted left and right as if the hospital itself might be listening. Where is Maris now? She asked. I didn't know, but I knew who would. D.S. Halden Price. And I did not want him hearing anything else from my mouth. The receptionist called my name, and I turned to see a woman in a plain coat stepping into the lobby with the steady posture of someone who did not need to raise her voice to be obeyed. She was not from Harbolite. You could see it in the way she moved, unhurried, unimpressed. She approached and held up a badge. Detective Inspector Rowan Vale, she said. Regional Major Crimes. Her eyes moved from my face to Nessa's, then down to the bulge of my coat pocket where the recorder and the folder sat. I understand there's suspicion of officer involvement, she said calmly. And I understand you have physical evidence. Relief hit me so hard my knees nearly softened. Yes, I said. D.I. Vale nodded once. Then you speak to me. Not to anyone else. Not even if you are pressured. A shape appeared at the end of the corridor, like a storm cloud stepping into a room. Halden Price. He walked toward us with purpose, his face set, his eyes too sharp for someone who was only coming to offer support. His gaze locked onto me first. Odelia, he said, voice controlled. We need to talk. D.I. Vale stepped forward slightly. Halden, she said, and her voice was polite but cold. You do not need to talk to anyone. You need to talk to me. Price's jaw tightened.
Rowan.
This is my case. It was your case, Vale corrected. Now it's mine. Stand down. Price's eyes flicked to my coat pocket. What do you have? He asked. A promise I intend to keep, I said quietly. His eyes narrowed. Give it to me. No, D.I. Vale said at the same moment. Price's head turned toward her. You don't understand what's happening here. Vale's gaze didn't blink. I understand enough. You were seen with an unidentified male at the cannery. A witness statement has already been logged. And now a woman is dead. Her voice stayed even. Hand over your badge and firearm. The lobby went still. Price's face drained of color. For a heartbeat, I thought he might fight it. Then his shoulders sagged by a fraction, as if something inside him had finally accepted the inevitable. He reached for his belt slowly and removed his firearm, then his badge. He placed them into Vale's outstretched hand. And for a moment he looked at me with something like resentment and something like relief. You should have stayed in your tea room, he said softly. I met his gaze. Belinda would still be alive if I had. His mouth tightened. Then he turned and walked away between two uniformed officers who had appeared quietly at Vale's signal. Nessa let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. D.I. Vale looked at me.
Now.
Show me what you have. We went into a small interview room off the lobby. Vale shut the door and nodded at the chairs. I placed the folder on the table first, then the recorder, then the velvet ribbon bag. Vale didn't touch anything yet. She looked at it all, as if memorizing the shape of the case. You tell me in order, she said. Start with the first abnormal moment.
I did.
I told her about Mr. Lark. The false reservation. The warning. The card that told me to check the sugar bowl. The capsule decoy. Belinda's collapse. The tin. The guest book message. The ribbon clue. The church ledger. Verity's resistance. The cannery chase. Price and Lark together. The tunnel. The teacup symbol. The locker evidence. Vale listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, "The man who called himself Lark. Can you describe him?" I described him as precisely as I could, choosing details that would not shift under stress.
Tall.
Dark coat. Calm posture. Clean gloves. A smile that looked practiced. Vale nodded. "And the wax seal on the letter at your home. Teacup stamp." "Yes." "And the wax seal at the cannery. Lark stamp." "Yes." She exhaled. "He's branding the case." Nessa's voice shook. "Why would anyone do that?" Vale's gaze sharpened. "Because he wants control of the narrative. And because he wants you frightened enough to follow his trail." She looked at me. "He's building a story around your tea room. He's using your setting as a stage." I swallowed. "Belinda told me not to let them make it a story about me." Vale nodded once. "Smart woman. Whoever did this wants public panic. Panic creates cover." I slid Belinda's handbag onto the table, the nurse having returned it to me. I pulled out the small hymn book tucked inside. "It's here," I said. Belinda said she hid the count. Vale's eyes narrowed. "Open it carefully." Inside the hymn book, between 2 pages, was a folded sheet of paper. Belinda's handwriting. A list of cash totals from recent fundraisers and a second list beneath it, smaller, hidden. Names. Verity Quill. Maris Carr. Holden Price. A name I didn't know, written last. Dorian Pike. Nessa's breath caught, sharp. "That's my brother," she whispered. Vale's face went very still. Nessa stared at the paper as if it might bite. "My brother was involved," she whispered.
No.
"He wouldn't." I looked at Nessa, and a terrible thought pushed through. Belinda's list might not be a list of guilty people. It might be a list of connected people. People pulled into the same web. Some as perpetrators. Some as witnesses. Some as casualties. Vale's voice was quiet. "Tell me about Dorian Pike." Nessa swallowed hard. "He worked at the cannery. Maintenance. He said he found shipments. He said he saw people moving crates at night. He said he was going to tell Belinda because she was the only one who would do something." Vale nodded slowly. "And then he died," Vale said. Nessa's eyes burned. "They said it was an accident." Vale looked at the hymn book again. Belinda thought it wasn't. I pressed my fingertips together under the table to keep from shaking. "So Belinda had the names," I said. "And that's why she was killed." Vale didn't answer immediately. She picked up the velvet ribbon bag and held it to the light, studying the wax smear and the hair. Then she set it down and looked at me. "Belinda may have been killed for what she knew," Vale said. "But you're being targeted for where you stand. Someone is trying to make you the center of this." "Why?" I asked. Vale's gaze was steady. "Because if people blame your tea room, the town turns on you. And while they're busy turning on you, they won't look at the church ledger, the development trust, the cannery, or a compromised detective." My throat tightened. Belinda was right. This was also about destroying my place. Not because my tea room mattered to the criminals. Because it mattered to the town. Kill the thing people love, and they will look everywhere except where you tell them not to. Vale slid the recorder closer. "We need what's on this." "It's dead," I said. "But it should still have data." Vale nodded. "We'll extract it. If it contains a confession, we move fast." Nessa whispered. "And Maris." Vale's eyes flicked to her.
Yes.
Maris. I felt a cold clarity settle. Maris had access to Belinda's kitchen. Maris retied the ribbon. Maris likely placed the teacup wax seal where it would point at me. And Maris was close enough to Verity to hide behind church respectability. But the bigger danger was still out there. Mr. Lark. The man who staged the sugar decoy and the guest book clue and the cannery trail. The man who said he arranged the poisoning. I looked at Vale. "You're going to find him." Vale's gaze sharpened. We will. But first we contain harm. That means you do not go back to your tea room alone. I nodded. Vale's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then looked up, expression tightening.
They've found something, she said.
Where? I asked. Vale stood. Your tea room. My stomach dropped. We reached the tea room within minutes, Vale's car pushing through snow slush while Nessa and I sat silent in the back, listening to the engine and our own breaths. The street outside my shop was cordoned off with tape. 2 uniformed officers stood by the door. A third spoke quietly into a radio. The windows of the tea room were dark, but something about the doorway looked wrong. The wreath on the door had been taken down. Not ripped. Removed neatly. And in its place, pinned to the wood with a brass tack, was a card. Cream-colored. Sealed with red wax. Stamped with a teacup. Vale held up a gloved hand to stop me from moving closer. She approached the door, examined the card, and then nodded to a forensic tech who stepped forward and removed it into an evidence bag. Vale turned to me.
Someone wants you to see it, she said.
The tech opened the card carefully and photographed the writing before reading it aloud. Belinda is dead. Now the town will need someone to blame. Smile gently, Odelia. Be the perfect hostess. Let them come to you with their grief and their rage. And when they do, listen. The murderer will confess, without realizing it. My skin went cold. Vale's voice was tight. He's directing you. Nessa whispered. He wants her ruined. I stared at my tea room door, at the spot where my wreath had been, and felt something crack and harden in my chest. This wasn't just a murder. It was manipulation. A person using Christmas warmth as camouflage for cruelty. Vale looked at me.
Odelia.
We can protect you, but you have to cooperate. I will, I said. And you have to stop following his breadcrumbs alone. I swallowed. Then you keep up. Vale's eyes narrowed slightly, and for the first time, I saw the faintest edge of respect. We will. But even as she spoke, I felt it. The quiet truth that frightened me most. Mr. Lark had gotten exactly what he wanted. Belinda dead. My tea room marked. The town about to turn its gaze toward me. And somewhere behind the scenes, the real money and the real corruption continuing to flow like a river in winter, dark and fast. The next move was mine, whether I liked it or not. Because if Mr. Lark was right about one thing, it was this. People confess most easily when they think they're safe. And in Harbolite, my tea room had always been where people came to feel safe. Now I would use that. Not as a trap for the innocent, as a net for the guilty. And I would do it calmly, carefully, and with the kind of patience that makes monsters underestimate you. Because the most dangerous thing in a cozy town is not the person who shouts. It's the person who smiles and listens and remembers everything. I opened the tea room the next afternoon. Not because I wanted to. Because the town would come anyway, whether the door was locked or not. Grief doesn't wait for business hours. People will stand in the cold and knock and ask for somewhere warm to put their feelings down for a moment. And because D.I. Rowan Vale told me something in a voice that didn't leave room for argument. If he wants your place to be the stage, she said, we control the stage. So we did. 2 plainclothes officers sat at the corner table near the window with newspapers open and untouched tea cooling beside their hands. A uniformed officer lingered outside, positioned like someone checking a parking sign but watching every face that approached. A forensic tech had already been through, dusting surfaces, bagging the guest book, collecting the wreath tack, photographing the wax seal card pinned to my door. The tea room felt familiar and foreign at the same time, like a home after a burglary. Everything was where it should be, but the air had been altered by the knowledge that harm had happened here. I kept the menu simple.
Tea. Scones.
Ginger biscuits. Nothing from Belinda's tin. Nothing baked in my kitchen that day would ever be questioned. And I kept the ember table empty. No one sat there. Not because I asked them not to. Because everyone in town had already heard where Belinda sat when she died. Rumor travels faster than snow. By 2 o'clock, they came. Not crowds, not tourists. Just locals with soft eyes and tight mouths, the kind of people who bring condolences like offerings. Brona arrived first, as I knew she would. She walked straight behind the counter without asking, set a paper bag down, and pulled out a loaf of fresh bread. "For you," she said simply. "You'll forget to eat." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Thank you." Brona looked around, her eyes catching on the empty ember table, then on the two customers by the window who were far too still. "I see you're not alone," she murmured.
"I'm not," I said.
"And I don't want you in danger." Brona snorted softly. "Danger doesn't send invitations. It just shows up, like everything else." She touched my shoulder briefly, a comfort offered, but not too quickly. Brona's comfort always came, with steel underneath. That was why it felt safe. Then the church ladies arrived in pairs, their voices hushed, their hands clutching handbags as if the leather could keep them steady. They spoke Belinda's name like a prayer. They asked if I was all right. They said they couldn't believe it. They said the town had lost its heart. And as they spoke, I listened the way Belinda would have listened, catching the small things hidden inside soft sentences. Who came to the hospital first? Who offered to handle paperwork? Who told everyone not to speculate? Who insisted the police would find a drifter and it would all be over soon? By 3, the tea room smelled like lemon and wet wool and restrained grief. And then Verity Quill walked in. She entered as if she belonged in every room, not because she was arrogant, but because she was practiced at being welcomed. Her coat was elegant. Her gloves were pale. Her expression was sorrow arranged beautifully across her face. Behind her walked Mariskar. Belinda's niece looked like someone who had cried all night and then tried to erase it with cold water. Her eyes were swollen. Her mouth pinched. Her hands clutched a small gift bag printed with tiny stars. My stomach tightened. Verity offered comfort first. Maris offered the posture of a victim. Both were dangerous forms of disguise. Verity's gaze found me immediately behind the counter. "Odelia," she said softly, as if speaking too loudly might break something. "I wanted to come sooner. I didn't know what to say." "You're here now," I replied. Verity moved closer. "Can we talk privately?" Di Vale had told me not to go anywhere alone. So I didn't. "Anything you want to say, you can say here," I said. Verity's eyes flicked to the corner where the plainclothes officer sat. "I see," she murmured. "You're being cautious." "Belinda is dead," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Caution is appropriate." Maris stood slightly behind Verity, eyes fixed on the ember table, as if it might look back. "I didn't mean," Maris's voice cracked. "I didn't know she would. I didn't know." I watched her carefully. "What didn't you know?" Maris blinked, startled, as if she hadn't expected a question that direct. "I mean, she was fine. She was just having tea." Verity stepped in smoothly. "Maris is in shock. We all are. The whole town is." "Shock doesn't create poison," I said quietly. A hush fell around us, not because I had raised my voice, but because grief makes people hungry for a villain. The room leaned toward me, listening. Verity's face tightened slightly. "Odelia, darling, this isn't the time." "This is exactly the time," I said. "Because someone wants this to become a story about me and my tea room instead of a story about why Belinda was killed." Verity's eyes flashed.
"Killed."
"That's a strong word." "So is dead," I replied. Maris made a small noise, a sob that didn't quite have tears attached to it. "I loved her," Maris whispered. I leaned forward slightly. "Then tell me where you were yesterday." Verity's jaw tightened. "Odelia." Maris swallowed. "I was at her house. She asked me to bring her scarf. Then I went home. And the mince pies." Maris blinked.
"What?"
"Belinda baked them," I said.
"She told me."
"She also told me you tied the ribbon." Maris's face drained of color. Verity's voice sharpened. "That's ridiculous." Belinda was confused. She was poisoned. She could have said anything. I kept my gaze on Maris. "Did you tie the ribbon?" Maris's lips parted, then closed. The silence stretched. And in that silence, the room made a decision without speaking. Eyes narrowed. Breath held. Maris whispered. It came loose. "That's not an answer," I said. Maris's gaze darted to the door. Verity moved closer to her. Protective. Odelia, you are accusing a grieving niece in public. I'm asking questions, I replied. Belinda would have asked them. That's why she's dead. Verity's face hardened for a moment, then softened again into warmth like a mask sliding back into place. Odelia, love, she said gently. You're exhausted and frightened.
You need rest.
You need someone to look after you. Comfort first. The warning flared in my mind. Do not trust the one who offers comfort first. I smiled politely, the kind of smile I had learned to use on difficult customers. I'm being looked after, I said. By the truth. Verity's eyes narrowed, just slightly. And in that tiny shift, I saw what she really felt. Not grief. Not concern. Impatience. Like she wanted this conversation to end before it went somewhere she couldn't control. D.I. Vale stepped in from the corner near the doorway, unnoticed until that moment because she moved like quiet authority. Mrs. Quill, she said calmly. Maris Carr. Thank you for coming. We'd like to speak with you both. Separately. Verity stiffened. And you are? Detective Inspector Vale, Vale replied, holding up her badge. Regional Major Crimes. Maris's knees seemed to soften. She grabbed the edge of a chair to steady herself. Verity lifted her chin. This is harassment. We're here to mourn. Vale's gaze was steady. Then you will cooperate, and we will all move forward. Maris Carr, come with me. Maris looked at Verity as if waiting for instruction. That, more than anything, was telling. Vale held out a hand toward Maris, not touching, just offering a direction. Maris moved. Verity's eyes followed her, calculating. Then Verity turned back to me, and her voice dropped into something intimate. Odelia, she said softly, you're making an enemy of the wrong people. I felt the calm inside me settle deeper. I think Belinda already made that enemy, I replied. Verity's smile didn't reach her eyes. Careful. This town protects its own. So did Belinda, I said. Until it didn't. Verity's gaze lingered on me, then she turned and walked out with a grace that felt rehearsed. The room breathed again once she was gone. Brona came closer, her voice low. You just poked the hornet's nest with a spoon. I kept my face steady. Belinda is dead. I'm done being polite. Brona's mouth twitched, the closest she came to approval. Good. I wiped the counter with a cloth that didn't need wiping, because my hands needed something to do. Inside the back room, Vale would be questioning Maris. Another officer would be questioning Verity. Evidence would be checked. Timelines built. And somewhere Mr. Lark was watching. I felt it in my bones. Not a supernatural sense. A practical one. The kind you develop when you've lived through something that teaches you predators don't like to miss the moment their plan blooms. At 4:10, the bell above the door chimed again. A man stepped inside, shaking snow from his coat.
Tall.
Dark wool. Calm posture.
Gloves.
My throat tightened. He wasn't wearing the exact same coat as the man from yesterday, but the silhouette was the same. The way he moved was the same. The way he paused just inside the doorway and let the room register him was the same. Then he smiled. It was a smaller smile than yesterday's, more sympathetic. A smile a man wears when he thinks it makes him trustworthy. I'm sorry to bother you, he said gently. I heard about Belinda. I just wanted to offer my condolences. Comfort. Offered quickly. Too quickly. I felt every hair on my arms rise. What's your name? I asked, keeping my voice polite. He blinked, as if surprised I hadn't recognized him from town.
Crispin Hale, he said.
A name I hadn't heard before. That didn't mean anything in Harbolite. People came and went. Some rented cottages for weeks and left without anyone learning more than their first name. But his eyes didn't behave like a visitor's. They behaved like a man who knew the room and was scanning for specific objects. The amber table. The guest book stand. The counter. His gaze lingered on the spot where I kept the sugar jar. Then he looked at me again. Are you all right? He asked, voice soft. This must be dreadful. I smiled. I'm managing, I said. Would you like tea? He nodded. If you're open. I am. I poured him a cup of plain black tea and set it on the counter in front of him rather than bringing it to a table. He hesitated, then took it. His fingers, I noticed, did not wrap around the cup. He held it by the handle only, careful, as if he didn't want to leave prints. My pulse quickened. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a coin purse. As he opened it, a small object glinted inside. A wax seal stamp. Not fully visible, but I caught the curve of metal, the shape of a handle. My mouth went dry. Interesting, I said lightly, as if making small talk. You do sealing wax. He froze for a fraction of a second. Then he smiled again. Old habit. People don't usually carry it with them, I said. He took a sip of tea and winced slightly, as if it were too hot. People carry odd things, he replied. I watched him with a calm face while my mind raced. If this was Lark, he had changed his name, changed his coat, changed his approach. But he couldn't change his habits. The gloves, the wax, the careful handling of objects, the need to control. I glanced toward the corner where the plainclothes officers sat. One of them met my eyes briefly, then looked away, subtly acknowledging he had noticed the man too.
Good.
I didn't have to trap him alone. Crispin Hale set down his cup. You must be overwhelmed by attention. I'm more overwhelmed by lies, I said softly. His eyes sharpened. Lies. Belinda was poisoned. I continued. Someone wants the town to blame my tea room. Someone is leaving me messages. His gaze didn't flicker with confusion. It flickered with interest. And, do you read the messages? He asked. Yes, I said. He smiled slightly. Then perhaps they're working. My blood chilled. Only someone involved would say that. I leaned forward just enough to let him feel my attention. Tell me something, I said quietly. How did you know Belinda would order the Christmas blend?
He paused.
And in that pause I saw it. The smallest mistake. The tiniest slip in the mask. He knew there was a Christmas blend. Yesterday, he had ordered it without reading the menu. Today, he had not asked what we served.
He assumed he knew.
His smile returned, slower now. People like predictable traditions. Belinda wasn't predictable, I said. She was consistent. That's different. His eyes held mine. Consistency is predictable. My stomach turned. In that moment I knew. This man was not here to mourn. He was here to measure whether I had become what he wanted. A woman who would follow clues and do his work for him. You've been in my tea room before, I said. He shrugged slightly. Many people have. No, I said, keeping my voice soft. You were here yesterday. You called yourself Lark. The room went quiet around us, as if it was listening too. Crispin Hale's smile did not vanish.
But it changed.
It sharpened. That's a pretty word, isn't it? He murmured.
Lark. Light. Song.
Something people associate with mourning. My throat tightened. What do you want? His gaze moved past me, toward the backroom door where Vale was questioning Maris. I want the truth, he said. Then go to the police, I replied. They're right here. His mouth curved. The police. He glanced toward the plainclothes officers and then away again, unimpressed. They see what paperwork tells them to see. They follow lines on paper and call it justice. I kept my voice calm.
And you?
You follow people until they break. Something bright flickered in his eyes. Not anger. Admiration. Ah, he said softly. You do understand. I felt my pulse in my throat. Belinda's dead, I said. Because of you. His eyes softened, and for a moment he looked almost sad. I didn't put poison in her body, he said. I put truth into motion. There's a difference. You arranged it, I said. He tilted his head. I arranged that the town would finally pay attention. Belinda was always going to die, Odelia. The moment she wrote those names down, she signed her own death warrant. All I did was make sure her death wasn't swept into silence. My stomach rolled. You're sick, I whispered. He exhaled, almost patient.
No.
I'm tired. Tired of watching people get buried under politeness. Tired of seeing crimes laundered with charity and hymns and warm smiles. He leaned closer, voice low. Belinda wanted to stop them, but she moved too slowly. She still believed in doing things the proper way. Committees, meetings, notes in a hymn book. His gaze sharpened. Proper ways get you killed in places like this. I stared at him, my hands clenched beneath the counter. And what are you? I asked. A savior. His smile returned, thin. A witness. The word hit hard because I had become one too, whether I wanted it or not. He reached into his pocket and placed something on the counter between us. A small battery. The exact kind that fit the recorder in my pocket. My skin went cold. He knew about the recorder. He knew it was dead. He had come to offer me the power to hear what was on it. Comfort, offered first, disguised as help. Do not trust the one who offers comfort first. I did not touch the battery. I don't take gifts from strangers, I said. His eyes glittered. You've already taken my clues. I didn't ask for them. No, he agreed softly. But you needed them. The plainclothes officer by the window shifted slightly. Another customer stood abruptly, murmuring an excuse, leaving the tea room because tension had become too thick to sip through. Crispin Hale did not look away from me. Put the battery on the table, he said, and walk away. I didn't move. He smiled. Smart. Then he turned his head slightly, just enough that his profile caught the window light, and he spoke in a tone that sounded like a casual remark. She died at 12:37, didn't she? After the second crash. My stomach dropped. The time of death had not been announced publicly. I hadn't even told Brona the exact time. Only the hospital staff and D.I. Vale would know that. Meaning this man had access. Either to the hospital system, or to the investigation, or to someone who did. And then he said something worse, something that made my blood freeze. She told you about the hymn book. My lungs stopped. No one outside that room should know. Not unless they were listening. Not unless they had someone close enough to hear. Or unless they were the person who needed Belinda silenced. My voice came out then. Who are you? He lifted his cup, took another sip, and set it down as if ending a conversation. You'll learn, he said. You're very good at learning. He turned toward the door. And as he passed the guest book stand, he laid his gloved fingertips on it lightly, like a blessing. Then he walked out into the snow. I did not chase him, because I wasn't the only one watching anymore. The moment he stepped outside, D.I. Vale appeared at my elbow like she had been standing in shadow. You recognized him, she said quietly. Yes, I whispered. He's Lark. And he knows things he shouldn't. Vale's jaw tightened. He left something. I looked down. The battery. Still on my counter. Untouched. Vale put on gloves and picked it up with tissue, placing it in an evidence bag. He just handed us trace, she murmured. And he handed us power, I said, voice low. For the recorder. Vale's eyes met mine. We don't use his battery. We test it, I said. For prints and residue and source. Then we use our own. Vale nodded once. She reached into her coat and produced a fresh battery from a small evidence kit. Professional.
Prepared.
We play it, she said. Nessa stood in the doorway to the back room, her face pale, her eyes wide. Maris, I realized, had not come back out. Vale inserted the battery into the recorder from the locker, pressed play, and held it between us, as if it were a fragile animal. A burst of static. Then a voice. Not Belinda's. Halden Price's voice. Unmistakable.
Low. Tense.
I told you this is a bad idea, he said. Another voice answered, smoother, with a calmness that made my skin crawl. Not Crispin's spoken tone from moments ago. This was different. Colder. More controlled. I'm not asking your opinion, the second voice said. I'm asking your cooperation. Price's voice tightened. She's a good woman. Belinda. She does charity work. She's not. She's an obstacle, the second voice replied. and obstacles get moved. There was a pause. A soft sound, like paper sliding across a table.
Price spoke again, quieter.
If she dies, it becomes murder. It becomes national. It becomes what it needs to become, the second voice said. A story. A lesson. An example. My blood turned to ice. This voice was Lark's real voice. Not the gentle condolences voice. This was the voice beneath. Price swallowed audibly. And Odelia Hart. A soft laugh. The tea woman.
She's perfect.
She'll keep the town talking. She'll keep the guilt focused. She'll do half our work for us, and she'll never realize it until it's too late. My throat tightened. Vale's hand clenched around the recorder. Price's voice sounded sick. You're using her. Yes, the second voice replied, without shame. And she'll survive. She's strong. She's lonely. Lonely women become very sharp when you point them toward a mystery. A pause. Then Price again. I can't keep covering this. The missing funds, the cannery shipments, the trust. It's going to collapse. It will collapse into what we build next, the second voice said. Now listen carefully, Halden. If you refuse, I will release what I have about the cannery fall last winter. I will make sure the world knows the only reason you kept your badge is because you let a young man die quietly. Nessa's breath caught like a snapped string.
Dorian.
Price's voice broke. Don't. You will do what I say, the second voice replied. And you will do it with a straight face. Because you are very good at straight faces. The recording crackled. Then came the final line, spoken softly, almost tender. Do not offer comfort first, Halden. It makes people suspicious. I went cold. He was quoting his own tactic. He had studied human behavior, like a craft. Vale shut off the recorder, her face hard as stone. That's enough, she said. Nessa's voice trembled. He killed my brother. Vale looked at her. He threatened to expose Price's involvement in your brother's death. That means your brother's death is part of the same web. My mouth went dry. So Lark is the mastermind. Vale's gaze sharpened. He's a manipulator. But we still need the poison chain. Nessa whispered, Maris. Vale nodded once. Yes. Vale moved to the back room, and I followed. Maris sat in the chair by my storage shelf, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Her eyes were red. Her face was the face of someone who had been holding a lie too long. Vale's voice was calm. Maris. Belinda is dead. Maris flinched as if struck. I didn't want that. Vale didn't raise her voice. Then tell me what you did want. Maris's mouth trembled. I wanted it to stop. What? Vale asked. Maris's gaze darted to the floor. Vale's tone stayed even. The missing donations. The cannery shipments.
The trust.
Tell me. Maris made a small sound, half sob, half laugh. You don't understand. Everyone thinks I'm just her niece. Just a helper. Just someone who ties bows and makes lists. She swallowed hard. Belinda treated me like I mattered. Then she started looking at the numbers. And you poisoned her. Maris's head snapped up. No, her voice rose.
No.
I didn't. I swear I didn't. Vale's eyes narrowed. You're tied the ribbon. Maris's breath shook.
Yes.
Because I wanted to check the tin. My heart pounded. Why? Maris's eyes filled. Because I was told to. Vale's voice was quiet. By whom? Maris whispered. Verity. My stomach turned. Vale's gaze sharpened. Why would Verity tell you to check Belinda's tin? Maris swallowed. Because Verity said Belinda was getting suspicious. Verity said Belinda might go to the police. Verity said we would all be ruined. You. I repeated. We. Maris's face crumpled. I helped with the fundraising. I helped with deposits. Verity told me which account to use. She told me it was temporary. She told me it was for redevelopment for the town for good. Maris's voice broke. She told me it was a loan. Vale's eyes hardened. And the cannery. Maris shook her head quickly. I didn't know about that. I swear. I only knew about the money. I looked at Vale. Then how did Belinda get poisoned? Maris's mouth opened, then closed, trembling. I don't know. Vale's voice went sharper.
Maris.
Belinda died. If you know something, now is the moment to say it. Maris squeezed her eyes shut. Then she whispered, the glaze. The word landed in my body, like ice. The glaze, I repeated. Maris nodded, tears spilling now. Belinda brushed the pies with glaze after baking. She always did. She said it made them shine. Verity gave her a small bottle. She said it was special holiday flavoring. She said it would make them smell more festive. My stomach rolled as memory snapped into place. That first smell. Orange peel. Cinnamon.
Smoke.
And underneath it, bitter chemical edge. Not from tea. From the air around the pastry. Vale's voice was controlled. Where is the bottle? Maris shook her head, sobbing. I don't know. Belinda kept it. She said she'd use it again next year. Vale exhaled slowly. Then we searched Belinda's home.
Now.
I stared at Maris. You didn't put poison in the pies, I said softly. Maris shook her head, crying.
No.
I didn't. I only tied the ribbon. I only looked because Verity told me to. I thought it was just money. I didn't know it would become death. Vale's gaze stayed on her. You still helped conceal theft. Maris nodded, shoulders shaking. I know. Vale turned to an officer. Hold her. We're not charging for murder yet, but she's not leaving. Then Vale looked at me. You're coming. I blinked. Why? Because he's using you, Vale said. And the best way to stop someone like that is to refuse to be moved like a piece on his board. She paused. And because he will try to contact you again. My throat tightened. He already did. Vale nodded. He will again. We left the tea room under the watching eyes of townspeople who had begun to gather outside, drawn by police tape and whispers and the human hunger for tragedy. I kept my chin up and my face calm because if I looked like a victim, they would make me one. In the car, Nessa sat rigid beside me, the folder clutched in her lap, like proof her grief hadn't been imagined. Vale drove with one hand and spoke without looking away from the road. We have motive, she said. Belinda found financial irregularities. We have opportunity. Verity had access to Belinda and the baking. We have a method. A contaminated glaze. And we have Lark, I said. Vale's jaw tightened. We have his voice. That's a start. Nessa whispered. He was in the tea room. Vale nodded. He wanted to see a reaction. I stared out the window at the harbor, at the gentle winter world that suddenly felt full of hidden corners. What is he? I asked quietly. Is he a killer? A journalist? A vigilante? What? Vale's voice was flat. He's a man who believes he's entitled to shape other people's lives for his idea of truth. The car slowed near Belinda Street. Blue lights painted the snow. An officer waved us through. Belinda's home was a modest place with a cheerful wreath still hanging on the door, the kind of wreath Belinda would have made herself. It looked wrong now, like cheer left behind after a body. Vale led us inside. The air smelled faintly of sugar and spice. Belinda had baked in this kitchen. Belinda had lived in this warmth. Vale moved like a professional through the space, scanning for the bottle. Nessa hovered near the doorway, hands clenched. I looked at the counter. A cooling rack still held crumbs. A brush lay beside a small dish where glaze might have been mixed. And then I saw it. A small bottle tucked behind the flour tin. Clear glass. Tiny label. Holiday essence. My breath caught. Vale's eyes narrowed. She put on gloves and lifted it carefully into an evidence bag. The liquid inside looked ordinary. That was the most frightening thing about poison. It hid inside normal. Vale held the bottle to the light and examined the label. The label was printed neatly, no brand name, no ingredients list. Just the words. Holiday essence. And beneath, in tiny print, an address. Not a store. A post office box. Vale exhaled. He's packaging poison like a gift. I looked at the bottle and felt my skin crawl. Because this wasn't just murder. It was artistry. Someone making death look festive. Vale turned to an officer. Run this. Prince. Chemical analysis. Find where it came from. Then she looked at me, her gaze steady. Odelia, he told you to listen. You listened. Good. She paused. Now you stop him. How? I whispered. Vale's voice was calm. By doing what he doesn't expect. I stared. What doesn't he expect? Vale's eyes sharpened. He expects you to chase him. He expects you to be frightened. He expects you to play the heroine in his story. Her voice lowered. We don't play. Nessa whispered. Then what? Vale's gaze held mine. We bait him with what he wants most. The story, I said. Vale nodded. The confession. My breath caught. Vale continued. He's obsessed with proof. Wax seals. Pressure writing. Recorders. He can't resist the final page being signed. She paused. We offer him a stage where he believes he can control the ending. And we close the curtain on him. The words should have comforted me. Instead, they made my stomach twist. Because if Vale was right, then Mr. Lark would come to my tea room again. And when he did, he would come prepared.
So would we.
D.I. Vale didn't let me mourn for long. She gave me 1 hour to breathe, 1 hour to sit in my back room with the kettle hissing softly and the town pressing against my windows like weather, 1 hour to feel the weight of Belinda's absence in the chair where she used to sit and in the way my hands kept reaching for tasks that no longer mattered. Then Vale came in, shut the door behind her, and spoke with the calm ruthlessness of someone who understood that grief is also a distraction. He's going to come back, she said. I stared at the steam rising from my mug. Lark. Vale nodded once. He wants the ending. People like him never leave a story unfinished. Nessa stood by the shelf, arms wrapped around herself, her eyes hollow with rage. She had been quiet since the recorder played. Quiet in the way people get when they are trying not to break something they can't fix. Vale looked at both of us. I'm not asking you to be brave, she said. I'm asking you to be precise. My throat tightened. What do you want from me? Vale's gaze was steady. We use your tea room as bait, but on our terms. We create a moment he cannot resist. I swallowed. What moment? Vale's voice softened slightly, not with comfort, but with respect for the dead. A memorial. The word landed heavy. A memorial for Belinda, I said quietly. Vale nodded. Public. Gentle. Something that makes the town gather. Something that makes him believe the story is moving exactly where he wants it. Nessa's voice was raw. And we just let him. We let him think he is, Vale replied. Then we take him. I stared at my hands. My tea room had been built for warmth, for slow afternoons, for people who needed quiet. Now it would be built into a trap. Belinda had asked me not to let them turn my place into the wrong story. But she had also asked me to keep it kindness. Kindness didn't mean softness. Kindness could be fierce. Kindness could be the refusal to let a town be controlled by a man who treated death like a plot device. All right, I said. How? Vale leaned closer, lowering her voice. We announce this, she said. Tomorrow afternoon, the Christmas Tea Room is hosting a remembrance table for Belinda Carr. People can write a message, share a memory, light a candle. We place a condolence book on the ember table. My stomach tightened at the thought of that table. Vale continued, we also let one piece of information slip on purpose. That Belinda left something behind. A sealed note. Something that names who did it. Nessa's eyes sharpened. But she didn't. No, Vale said. She left names. In a hymn book. Which is evidence. And he doesn't know what we have, and what we don't. He only knows he needs control. I felt cold behind my ribs. He'll come for the book, I whispered. Vale nodded. He will try to. Or he will try to plant something to make the narrative bend back toward you. Nessa's breath shook. And Verity. Verity is contained, Vale said. Maris is contained. Holden Price is contained. The bottle is being tested. The ledger is being seized. That's the legal path. She paused. This, she said, is the human path. The path where we catch the storyteller. I swallowed. And what do I do? Vale's gaze held mine. You do what you do best, she said. You host. You listen. You watch what people touch. You notice who arrives early. You notice who avoids being seen. I looked down at my tea room apron hanging on its hook. A small thing. A domestic thing. It had felt powerless for so long. Suddenly it felt like armor. The next day, the memorial table was set by noon. I chose the smallest candle jars I had, the ones that looked like warm lanterns rather than church votives. I placed a clean, thick book on the ember table with a pen tied to it by a length of plain twine. No ribbon, no velvet, no softness that could hide a blade. I placed a framed photo of Belinda at the edge of the table, one I printed from the town website. Belinda in a winter coat, smiling beside a charity hamper. Her eyes kind and determined. And, beside the photo, a simple sign in my handwriting. For Belinda. Leave a memory. Speak her name. At 1 o'clock, D.I. Vale's people took their positions. They were not obvious. That was the point. A man in a knit cap pretending to read by the window was actually watching the door reflection. A woman with a stroller paused at the street outside, and moved on, and then paused again, timing arrivals. The two plainclothes officers I had seen yesterday sat at separate tables now, separated so they could watch different angles. I wore a calm face because I had learned, as a woman in a small town, that calm is a form of power. People came in quietly. They did not order much.
A tea.
A biscuit. A scone they didn't finish. They moved to the ember table, wrote a line, touched the photo, and backed away as if grief were contagious. And in the middle of it all, I listened. I listened the way Belinda would have. Not for drama. For detail. At 2:15, Brona came in and placed a small wreath of rosemary on the table. For remembrance, she said softly. Then she leaned in toward me and murmured, words out. Which word? I asked. Brona's eyes flicked to the candle jars. That Belinda left a sealed note naming the one who did it. I kept my face steady. Who said it? Brona's mouth tightened. It started where these things always start. The church. People leaving the midday service. So Verity's influence was still moving, even if she was contained. Or Lark's influence was moving through other mouths now. At 3:10, a man entered who did not belong among mourners. He wore a black wool coat, leather gloves, no hat despite the cold. His hair was dark with gray at the temples. His posture was composed. Crispin Hale.
Lark.
He paused in the doorway for half a heartbeat, taking the room in. Then his gaze landed on the ember table and the condolence book, and something softened behind his eyes. Not grief. Satisfaction. He moved toward me at the counter. You've done something lovely, he said quietly. The town needed this. I kept my voice neutral. People needed to say goodbye.
His eyes held mine.
And you? I didn't answer. He placed coins on the counter without ordering anything, as if paying for access. Then he walked to the ember table. My heart hammered, but my face stayed calm. He picked up the pen and began to write.
Slow.
Deliberate. A performance. People around him watched with soft curiosity because he looked like a man who knew what to do in grief. He finished writing, set down the pen, and reached for the condolence book as if to close it. Instead, his gloved fingers slipped beneath the cover, as if searching for something inserted between pages. He didn't find it. A flicker of irritation tightened his jaw. He looked at the candle jars, then the framed photo, then the little sign. Then his gaze moved to the guest book stand near the entrance. He turned toward it. He had placed messages in books before. He would do it again. Vale's people were watching. I could feel it in the stillness that settled, in the way ordinary customers became less ordinary without realizing it. Crispin reached the guest book stand and touched the book lightly, as if blessing it. Then he began flipping through pages. Not reading.
Scanning.
Looking for his own name. Looking for the indented clue he had left. Because people like him didn't believe in coincidence. They believed in their own design. He found something and paused. A small smile tugged at his mouth. Then his hand slid into his coat pocket. Vale moved. Not rushing. Not shouting. just stepping into place. The plainclothes man by the window rose and drifted nearer. The woman with the stroller appeared at the entrance, as if returning for something she forgot. The other plainclothes officer positioned himself near the counter. Crispin did not notice, because his attention was on what he had found in the guest book. I saw his gloved fingers lift a folded slip of paper. A fake. Vale had planted it. I knew that because I had watched her write it, watched her press hard to create pressure marks, watched her fold it and slide it into the book like bait. Crispin unfolded it. His eyes scanned. His smile faded. He looked up, sharply, as if sensing the room shift around him. Vale stepped forward. "Crispin Hale," she said calmly. "Or whatever name you'd like to give me today." His eyes narrowed, then smoothed into a smile that would have charmed a room full of mourners. "Detective," he said gently. "I'm just paying my respects." Vale's voice stayed even. "You are attempting to remove evidence from an active investigation." Crispin's gaze flicked around the room, taking in faces, calculating. "This is a tea room," he said lightly. "People write notes. People pick them up. Hardly a crime." Vale's eyes didn't blink. "Put your hands on the table." His smile stayed, but his eyes hardened. "No," he said softly. "I don't think I will." Vale nodded to the officer by the counter. In that instant, Crispin moved.
Fast.
Not toward the door.
Toward me.
He crossed the space in 2 strides and reached for my wrist, not to hurt, but to anchor, to use me as a shield the way men like him always did. The way they used women to soften the edges of their violence. My body reacted before fear could. I stepped back and twisted my wrist free, the way Brona taught me years ago when she was showing me how to break a grip without panic. Crispin's fingers closed on air. His eyes widened just slightly. He hadn't expected resistance. He recovered quickly and smiled again, smaller now, sharper. "Still playing hostess," he murmured. "Even now." Vale moved in, and the other officer closed the distance. Crispin stepped back, and something small fell from his coat pocket and skittered across the floor. A wax seal stamp. It rolled and stopped near the leg of a chair. The teacup emblem was visible on its base. The room seemed to inhale. Someone near the window made a small sound. A woman's whisper, shocked and certain. "That's from the letters." Vale's gaze went to the stamp, then to Crispin.
"Hands," she said.
Crispin looked around at the watching faces. He understood then that the story he wanted was slipping from his control. He raised his hands slowly, palms outward, as if surrender could look graceful. Vale nodded to the officer. Handcuffs clicked shut. It was not dramatic. It was not loud. It was simply final. And in that quiet moment, I felt something settle. Belinda's name had been spoken. The town had watched the mask fall. The tea room had held the truth without breaking. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and persistent, as if the world were trying to cover the town's ugliness with something clean. Vale escorted Crispin toward the door, but as they passed the amber table, he turned his head slightly and looked at Belinda's framed photo. For a moment, something human flickered in his expression. Then it hardened into contempt. "She was brave," he said softly. "Bravery is expensive." Vale's voice was cold. "So is murder." Crispin smiled. "Murder is common. Narrative is rare." Vale didn't respond. She guided him out. The tea room stayed quiet for several long seconds after the door shut. Then someone began to cry softly near the window. Not hysterical. Not performative. The sound of a town realizing the danger had been sitting beside them, with a warm smile. Brona stepped behind the counter and handed me a glass of water without speaking. I drank and felt my throat loosen slightly. Nessa stood near the doorway, her hands clenched, her eyes burning. "He's caught," she whispered. "Yes," I said. "But Verity," she added, voice tight. "And my brother." I looked at her. "We don't stop," I said quietly. Vale returned an hour later with a kind of tiredness that meant she had been moving fast. She carried an evidence bag in one hand. Inside were 2 stamps side by side. The teacup. The lark. She held it up so I could see. The bases were worn from use. Custom-made. Not a novelty kit. A set that belonged to one person. Vale set the evidence bag down on the counter. We traced the post office box from the holiday essence label, she said. It was rented under the name Crispin Hale. Nessa's voice was sharp. That's his real name. Vale nodded. It appears to be. He's not local. He's been in and out of coastal towns for years. He moves when heat builds.
She paused.
He used Holden Price as access. He used Verity Quill as cover. He used Maris Carr as hands. My skin crawled. And Belinda as the martyr. Vale's eyes were steady. Yes. Nessa's throat worked as she swallowed. And my brother. Vale's gaze softened slightly, not comfort, just acknowledgement. We reopened the cannery death, she said. And we found what your brother found. Records of shipments. Not food. High-value items. Small crates. Labeled as renovation supplies. Moved through Harbolite Renewal Trust. Money laundering wasn't just money. It was movement. Goods that could disappear quietly and become cash elsewhere. Vale continued. Your brother documented it. He went to Belinda. Belinda started auditing the donation streams because she recognized a pattern. That's when they decided she was too dangerous. Nessa's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. So, who killed my brother? Vale exhaled slowly. Holden Price covered it. He didn't push him, but he was there. He kept others from investigating. In exchange for protection and money. Nessa's hands trembled. And Crispin. Vale nodded. Crispin used the death as leverage. He threatened to expose Price unless Price cooperated. My stomach turned. So, he wasn't just exposing corruption. He was feeding off it. Vale's voice stayed even. He wanted control. He wanted a story. He wanted the town to look at your tea room while he harvested confession and fear. I leaned against the counter, exhausted in a way that felt older than the last 2 days. What happens now? I asked. Vale's gaze held mine. Now we prosecute. We lock down the renewal trust accounts. We seize the cannery records. We arrest Verity Quill for conspiracy and tampering with donations and suspected poisoning pending lab confirmation. We charge Crispin Hale with murder and manipulation and obstruction. And Maris? I asked quietly. Vale's expression tightened. Maris will be charged for the theft and for her role in concealing records. Whether she faces more depends on what the lab confirms and what her statements reveal. Nessa whispered. She didn't know the glaze was poison. Vale's eyes were steady. She helped anyway. People don't get to hide behind ignorance when they choose secrecy over honesty. The room fell quiet again. Outside, snow continued falling softly, indifferent. I looked at the ember table. Belinda's photo still sat there, surrounded by candle jars and messages. I felt a strange ache, both grief and gratitude. Belinda had been right to count twice. Belinda had been right to write names down. Belinda had been right to be persistent. And Belinda had died because she believed in doing things properly. I wasn't sure what lesson to take from that. Vale seemed to read my face. Belinda didn't die because she was proper, Vale said quietly. She died because other people were corrupt. Don't let their corruption become a reason to stop doing things right. Let it be the reason you keep insisting on it. I swallowed hard. Nessa stepped closer to the condolence table and looked at Belinda's photo. She was the only one who listened to my brother, she whispered. I touched Nessa's shoulder gently. We listened too late. Nessa shook her head once, fierce.
No.
We listen now. And we don't stop. That was the part that felt like Belinda. Not the suffering. The insistence. The steady refusal. 2 weeks later, the tea room smelled like cinnamon again. Not the chemical edge beneath it. Not the bitter hint of danger. Just cinnamon. Just tea. Just warmth. The ember table was still there, but it no longer felt like an open mouth. It felt like a place that had been tested and remained standing. I kept one candle jar there now, unlit in the daytime, lit every evening after closing. Not as superstition, as remembrance. A framed note sat beside it, written in my own hand. Belinda Carr. She counted what others ignored. Sometimes, justice looks like a courtroom. Sometimes, it looks like a woman refusing to be quiet. I had changed the sugar bowls. New ones. No lids that could hide anything. I had placed my spices behind the counter, where only I could reach them. I had installed a better camera system. Not because I wanted to live in fear. Because I wanted to live in reality. And reality, I had learned, did not punish preparedness. It rewarded it. Nessa started coming in every morning at 8. Not as a customer. As a helper. She didn't smile much yet. Grief had made her face narrower, sharper. But she worked quietly, wiping tables, arranging chairs, learning how to make tea the way Belinda liked it, strong and honest. One morning, as snow melted into slush outside, Nessa set down a tray and looked at me. "I keep thinking about him," she said. "Crispin." "Yes." Her voice tightened. How he talked like he was doing something noble while he was destroying people. I nodded. That's how some monsters survive. They call their hunger a mission. Nessa stared at the candle jar on the ember table. "Will you ever feel safe again?" she asked. I thought about it. Safety wasn't a single feeling. It wasn't a locked door or a police presence. It was a pattern built slowly, day, by small choices. "Yes," I said. "But not the kind of safe that comes from pretending nothing bad happens. The kind of safe that comes from knowing I can face what does." Nessa exhaled, as if that answer mattered. On the wall behind the counter, I added a small framed sign beneath the menu. "We keep records. We count twice. We protect each other." It wasn't a slogan. It was a vow. And on the last day before Christmas, the tea room filled again. Not with whispers this time. With warmth. With people who ordered tea and listened to carols and wrote Belinda's name in the condolence book and meant it. With people who looked at me with something like apology for having been ready to blame me, ready to accept the convenience story. They didn't say the apologies out loud. They didn't need to. They simply came. They sat. They stayed. And for the first time since the night Belinda walked in smiling with her snowflake bag, I felt the tea room become what it had always been meant to be. Not a stage. A shelter. If you're still here with me, thank you for keeping the light on through the darker parts of this story. If you want another calm, clue-driven mystery set in warm places with complicated truths, save Harbolite Mysteries and come back for the next one. And if you have a moment, leave a comment with the first clue that made you suspicious. I read them when the kettles are cooling and the town is quiet. Sleep well tonight. Let the world be soft around you. And remember, comfort is beautiful, but clarity is what keeps you alive.